What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto and Kakashi met young Iruka and ANBU Kakashi in the past? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. The air crackled with a menacing energy as Mizuki loomed before them, a sight that sent chills down Naruto's spine. He appeared almost monstrous, the top half of his body grotesquely swollen, as his once familiar features twisted and deformed. Jagged claws extended from his elongated fingers, and dark, angry stripes marred his skin, making him look like something straight out of a nightmare. Naruto didn't think, his body moved on instinct. "Naruto, wait!" He heard Iruka's frantic call behind him, but it was too late. His heart raced, adrenaline surging through his veins as he launched himself at Mizuki. Just as he was about to strike, the man vanished. Before he could process what happened, Mizuki materialized right in front of him. Mizuki struck his fist, and sharp pain exploded in his jaw, sending him crashing to the ground. Fiery pain lit up his entire body, making it hard to focus. "Naruto, are you okay?" Iruka's voice rang out, a steady presence amidst the chaos. The concern in Iruka's tone pierced through the haze of fear and confusion. He could feel the urgency in the air. Down deep, he wanted to get up, push past the pain, and protect Iruka, his sensei, the one who believed in him when no one else did. It was an instinctive reaction, one that barely registered before he shook it off. Right now, he couldn't afford to think about it. He just couldn't. "If I were in your shoes, I'd be more worried about myself," Mizuki taunted with a smile dripping with malice. The sounds of combat filled the air, shouts and clashes echoing all around him. As he struggled to lift his head, a piercing scream reached his ears. "Tsubaki!" he shouted, panic rising in his chest. He felt helpless, knowing he wouldn't reach her in time. But just then, fate intervened. Iruka, always alert and quick, leapt into action and caught her mid-fall. Relief washed over Naruto for a fleeting moment. But their respite was short-lived. Mizuki had already teleported behind them and shot a powerful kick, sending both Iruka and Tsubaki crashing into a nearby tree, and Naruto's heart sank. "Iruka-sensei," he gasped, desperation clawing up his throat. The thought of losing him was unfathomable. He couldn't let this happen, not after everything they had been through together. Memories of shared laughter, training sessions, and late-night talks flooded his mind, but he pushed them away. Now wasn't the time for distractions, he had to focus. Mizuki wasn't going to hurt anyone else. Fueled by rising anger, Naruto summoned a horde of shadow clones. "Still using the same old boring attack, huh?" Mizuki scoffed, a smirk plastered on his face. "You sure haven't gotten any better." Naruto yelled as he felt a twinge of frustration surge through him. Mizuki's movements were almost impossible to track. He wasn't vanishing into thin air, he was just too fast, slipping into Naruto's blind spots as he picked off the clones one by one. But that fleeting moment gave Naruto enough time to vault onto a tree branch, launching himself at Mizuki with a war cry. However, before he could even make contact, Mizuki's fist slammed into his jaw with brutal force, sending Naruto sprawling to the ground again. The rough fabric of his jacket scraped painfully against his already battered skin. This man was like a stone wall, impossible to break through. No matter how hard he tried, the chances of landing a hit felt closer to zero. Mizuki scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. "It's not like I'm predicting your moves, kid. You just move so slowly." Before Naruto's eyes managed to catch up, Mizuki's foot connected with his face. Pain exploded through his senses, and he could feel his body going numb. His vision swam, and he gasped, blood rushing to his face as he hit the ground hard. "Don't get upset. You had this coming from the start, stupid fox demon." Mizuki laughed, his voice echoing like a cruel taunt. Black dots danced around the edges of his eyeballs before he felt the crushing weight of Mizuki's foot on his stomach, twisting in deep, causing him to cry out in pain. "Are you really going to give up, kid?" he snarled before scoffing. "No, I want you to feel the same pain I've endured for years. And we're just getting started, right, Naruto?" Mizuki's foot pressed down harder, eliciting a gasp of pain as his ribs protested, making it harder to breathe. The man's smile seemed to widen at that. He could barely muster the strength to gasp. the world around him fading into a blurred haze as his eyes watered. He felt his consciousness slipping away, the black spots in his eyes creeping back in faster. Time lost its meaning. The chaos of the battle dissolved into a distant roar, and the anguished cries of Iruka were mere whispers in the storm of his mind. Get up! He has to get up! He urged himself, but every inch of his body felt like it was being sliced by countless knives. Another loud slam echoed, followed by Iruka's agonized groan. I'm so tired of you acting like you know everything, Iruka. Mizuki sneered, his malice palpable. I was gonna kill the kid first, but now you're just getting in my way. Naruto's heart raced as he watched Mizuki retrieve the giant shuriken from his back. Just like old times, remember? No. The word burst from Naruto's lips, tinged with desperation. The world seemed to move in slow motion. Panic clawed at him, squeezing his heart like a vice. He willed his body to move, but it felt heavy, as if he were drowning in thick, sticky molasses. There was no way Iruka could dodge that fast, and if he didn't act fast, Iruka would die. The shuriken sliced through the air with terrifying precision. Naruto felt the sharp pain through his spine before the realization kicked in. A cry of anguish tore from his throat, echoing in the tense silence as Iruka's eyes widened in shock, mirroring the agony coursing through Naruto's veins. Naruto, why? Iruka's voice trembled, filled with disbelief, his body stiff. Despite Naruto being the one hurt, the anguish in Iruka's face told a different story. It was as if he was watching Naruto break apart right in front of his sensei, shattering into pieces. Blood dripped from Naruto's nose and lips, mingling with his resolve. He could feel Iruka's eyes watching him, and he knew he couldn't let this be the end. Iruka had always been there for him, his unwavering support illuminating the darkest of days. He wouldn't let Mizuki win, not now, not ever. He wouldn't let go of his precious people, no matter the cost. He dug deep, summoning every ounce of strength to rise. Mizuki, don't you dare lay another finger on my sensei. His voice emerged like a growl, harsh and raspy. Mizuki paused, disbelief flashing across his face for a fleeting moment before a bark of cold laughter erupted from him, a jarring, mocking sound that lacked joy. The irony of the situation twisted something inside him. It was almost as if he reveled in the cruel fate unfolding before them. Oh, this is just too perfect. Mizuki jarred, his green eyes dark as storm clouds. Nothing ever changes, does it? Not even the tiniest detail. Naruto pushed himself off Iruka, shaking with the effort as he let his sensei sit up, shifting his focus back to the crazed man. But I'll change that, after all. The only reason I was defeated the last time was because I underestimated that conniving fox demon. The air began to crackle with energy as Mizuki drew upon his dark power. Chakra flared around him, intensifying 100-fold, and his body twisted unnaturally. He transformed, skin turning an unsettling orange as the black markings thickened, more pronounced than before. What the hell is happening to him? Iruka murmured, his eyes widening in horror. I won't let my guard down again. Mizuki vowed, a twisted smirk creeping across his lips. I'll call upon all my strength if that's what it takes to defeat you. Naruto was already pushed to his limits, half beaten and struggling to comprehend what was happening. Mizuki had grown tenfold, not just in size but in power, leaving Naruto feeling at an utter loss. This couldn't be the end for him. He still needed to bring Sasuke back and knew that Mizuki might serve as his only link to Orochimaru. But Mizuki sensed his weakness, seizing the opportunity to strike at him again and again. Each strike felt like thunder reverberating through his veins, electric fire lacing pain through his body, blurring his vision into a haze. Blood mixed with sweat matted his hair against his forehead, dripping down into his eyes. Suddenly, Mizuki's calloused hand clamped down on the front of Naruto's jacket, lifting him off the ground as though he were nothing more than a rag doll. Are you impressed, you little brat? Mizuki sneered, his words a taunt that felt like knives. Rage swelled within Naruto, eclipsing his fear, yet drowning out the world around him. All he could hear was the deafening roar in his head. Desperation clawed at his heart like a wild animal. He needed to know where Orochimaru had taken Sasuke, he had to bring him back home. But the noise in his mind was a tempest that overwhelmed even his frantic thoughts. As Mizuki hung him there, Naruto gasped, feeling the burning sensation spread like wildfire across his back as he weakly pawed at Mizuki's grip. Helplessness washed over him, a familiar, suffocating embrace. Images flooded Naruto's mind of that day with Iruka, the man who had shielded him from a shuriken. The blood staining the man's jacket was burned into his irises. Those agonizing nights spent by Iruka's bedside in the hospital, listening to the beat of his heart as hope flickered in the darkness. The aroma of ramen that taunted him during lonely walks to Ichiraku's, saving each bowl like a beacon for when Iruka would finally wake. Mizuki's derisive laughter broke through his thoughts as he finally finished his sadistic rant, throwing Naruto back to the ground with a force that stole the breath from his lungs. "Listen to me," Mizuki shouted, his voice echoing through the forest, but it felt impossible to focus, hard to collect the remnants of his thoughts amidst the chaos that threatened to consume him whole. Breathing heavily, Mizuki looked winded, and for a fleeting moment, the flicker of hope ignited in Naruto's chest. He caught a glimpse of flickering light through the trees behind Mizuki. Iruka? Some instinct within urged him to rise, to fight through the pain that threatened to swallow him whole. Pushing back against the gnawing darkness, he mustered every ounce of remaining chakra and pushed himself back onto his feet. Mizuki lunged again, but this time, Naruto was ready. He dodged the grasp with newfound determination, a fierce grin breaking through the agony. "If you're so great, then why don't you catch me?" he shouted defiantly, his voice laced with a mix of fury and thrill. Ahead of him, Iruka stood like a lighthouse in a storm, clear and unwavering. His hand signed, beckoning Naruto to jump, his expression a blend of encouragement and trust. The flicker of hope burned within Naruto, igniting a fire in his chest that lunged him forward. With a fierce leap, he ascended into the air, driven not just by instinct but by the yearning to protect what mattered most to him. The sturdy branch beneath him felt like a momentary sanctuary. As he collected his breath, he looked down to see Iruka closing his eyes, forming intricate hand signs for a sealing ninjutsu, paper seals fluttering around him with an unearthly energy that infused the air with anticipation. Mizuki faltered, confusion and furious rage etched into his features. Finally free to act, Naruto jumped down, adrenaline fueling him as he began to form his Rasengan, every ounce of pent-up anger coiling within him. He hurled it at Mizuki's stomach, the impact resonating like a thunderclap, sending shockwaves through the air. Naruto felt the edges of his consciousness begin to fray, reality warping like a mirage. Iruka's voice was suddenly distant, echoing in his mind as he fought to stay anchored to the present. Everything around him blurred into an indistinct haze. He couldn't tell where the shadows ended and reality began. Iruka's words, laced with urgency and concern, drifted like whispers on the wind, a tether to the waking world that felt perilously close to slipping away as the encroaching darkness threatened to claim him. "Ah, Naruto." The surprise in Iruka's voice was clear as they unexpectedly ran into each other. Naruto had been feeling the weight of Iruka's distance ever since he woke up in the hospital. Iruka, usually so warm and cheery, seemed caught in a fog of his thoughts, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Something wasn't right. "Iruka-sensei," Naruto exclaimed, letting his enthusiasm spill over like an overflowing cup. "It feels like ages since we last saw each other." Iruka chuckled softly, a mix of affection and sorrow flickering across his face. "You saw me just yesterday, Naruto." After a beat, Iruka sighed heavily, as if he bore a burden too significant for one person alone. In his fleeting smile lay a hint of something deeper, a struggle that made Naruto's heart ache. "It's been way too long since we had ramen together. How about we grab some?" Iruka's smile was hesitant, and he scratched the scar on his nose, a gesture Naruto recognized as a sign of his sensei's discomfort. "Ramen? You're the best, Iruka-sensei." Naruto could hardly contain his excitement, practically bouncing in place. It feels like it's been forever since the two of them had gone to get ramen together. Naruto was so happy that they could finally spend some time together. As they made their way to Ichiraku's, the familiar path felt laden with a new weight of unspoken words. The air was thick with an unresolved tension, wrapping around him like a heavy shroud. Iruka's silence hung in the air, palpable, and for Naruto, it felt all too crushing. Since the confrontation with Mizuki, everything had shifted. Iruka seemed lost, his thoughts wandering to places Naruto couldn't follow. It was as if an invisible wall had risen between them, or they stood on opposite sides of a locked door with a key that was nowhere to be found. But who could blame Iruka? The betrayal he endured, a childhood friend turned foe, was a scar too deep to brush off. Once they arrived at Ichiraku's, the comforting bustle of the ramen shop enveloped him. They slipped into their usual spots, the familiarity of it all offering a momentary solace amidst the uncertainty. Iruka offered Tucci a slight nod. In an instant, the ramen chef was working his magic, steam rising from the bowls as rich aromas wafted towards Naruto. "So, how are you healing up, Naruto?" Iruka asked, a strained smile tugging at his lips as he looked back at the blonde. "I healed up great, Iruka-sensei. My back doesn't even hurt anymore." Naruto grinned as Tucci handed them the bowls of ramen, quickly beginning to stuff his face with it. However, Iruka stared blankly at his own food, and soon the awkward tension was back again. In an attempt to break the silence, Naruto launched into a spirited monologue about his upcoming training with Pervy Sage and how he'd been working hard on his Rasengan. Surely, he thought, this would spark something in the man who was always on his case about his training. But instead, Iruka's responses were mere absent-minded hums, his chopsticks picking at the ramen as if it were nothing more than a pile of leaves. The lack of response stung, worse than any physical pain. Naruto hated that feeling, a gnawing sensation deep within him, reminding him of how often he had experienced rejection. Naruto could recognize when someone was pulling away. He had felt that suffocating isolation too many times before. It clawed at him now, a familiar agony that settled into the pit of his stomach. Hadn't he proven himself, time and again? He was no longer that foolish child who pulled pranks in hopes of earning a smile. He stood here now, a proud Leaf Village shinobi, forged in the fires of will. And Iruka obviously was distracted by something, but couldn't he at least try to talk to him? He hasn't seen Iruka act so distant to him in a long time. He remembers back when Iruka had tried to ignore him, a stern facade battling against the laughter that spilled from Naruto's lips. He recalled those fleeting moments of confusion, wondering what lay behind Iruka's gaze when it lingered too long, just as it did now. Naruto hated it when people looked at him that way, as if he were a pest that wouldn't go away. Was Iruka finally tired of him? Was he finally too much for Iruka? Too loud? Too brash? Too much himself? No, that couldn't be it. Iruka never cared about that before now. Even though his body was healed, Naruto's heart felt as if it were bleeding out, a bitter thought, one he couldn't bear. He refused to lose anyone else, not after Sasuke. A fierce resolve ignited within him, hotter than any chakra he had ever wielded. He wouldn't allow Iruka to turn his back, he refused to let that happen. Not now, not ever. Even if it meant provoking anger in his sensei, Naruto needed Iruka to listen to him, to look at him. "What's your deal, Iruka-sensei?" he blurted out, slamming his hands on the table, frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. "You've been acting all weird since I woke up from the hospital." "I don't know what you're talking about, Naruto," Iruka muttered inattentively, a hint of defensiveness lacing his tone. His gaze remained glued to the bowl of ramen before him. It felt like an old dance they'd performed countless times. Iruka was a master at shutting him out, pretending like his feelings didn't matter. But Naruto was tired of feeling like a fragile little boy in need of protection. "I'm not a kid anymore, Iruka-sensei," he said, turning to face him fully on his chair. "Where is this coming from?" Iruka asked sternly, finally lifting his gaze to meet Naruto's as he set his chopsticks down on his bowl. "That's what I'm asking you. You've barely even talked to me after that fight with Mizuki." At the mention of Mizuki, Iruka visibly stiffened, the tension in the air thickening. "You want to talk about the fight? Fine, we can talk about the fight." Iruka stood up slightly from his seat, fervor rising in his voice. "Why on earth would you think it was a good idea to take that shuriken to the back like that?" His face flushed red with a mix of anger and concern. Getting a feel of why Iruka's been acting so shut off, Naruto retorted, "I'm a leaf shinobi now, just like you. I've been one ever since you gave me this Hite 8. So stop treating me like I'm not." His voice was sharper than he intended as he gestured to his Hite 8. "That's the issue, Naruto," he said, his tone softening as he sat back down. "You may be a shinobi, but," he hesitated, choosing his words with care. "You're still No, you're still a child. You shouldn't be the one saving me." The hurt and frustration of Iruka's eyes settled heavily over him like a suffocating blanket. "What's that supposed to mean, huh?" His voice trembled, the anger and hurt swirling within him like a tempest, threatening to spill over. Iruka's words felt like a dismissal of everything Naruto had sacrificed and accomplished, reducing him to a child ready to run and hide at the mere thought of a threat. Was this truly how Iruka saw him? Just a fragile little boy, blind to the gritty realities of the world? "Stop looking down on me," he shouted as he shut his eyes in frustration, as he bangs his fist down on the counter once more. Naruto opened his eyes and thrusted a finger at Iruka's chest. "Do you realize you would have died if I hadn't done anything?" Iruka scowls at him, pushing Naruto's hand away with the back of his own in an abrupt motion. "It's not your responsibility to protect me, Naruto. You could have gotten seriously hurt, more than you already are. You could have." He cut himself off, clenching his fists tight as if the very thought of finishing his statement pained him. Naruto felt disbelief surge within him, like each word was a dagger to the heart. Did Iruka want him to do nothing? To stand idly by and watch as he dies? The heaviness of those expectations pressed down on him like a crushing weight. "Oh, but it's fine if you can? I'm not your student anymore, Iruka-sensei. You can't dictate what I can and can't do." The atmosphere turned electric, every unspoken feeling hanging heavily between them. "It's not about that, Naruto. I know I'm not your teacher anymore, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stop worrying about you." Iruka's hands flailed in frustration, desperation in his eyes as he made his point. "It's not your job to worry about me anymore, Iruka. You're not my dad." Iruka flinched, as if Naruto's words physically burned him. His surprise hung in the air, a painful realization flashing in his gaze. Time seemed to freeze as silence enveloped them. Iruka turned away sharply, a shadow casting over his face, hiding his emotions like a shroud. Iruka reached into his vest to pull out his wallet and paid for the meal calmly. The stool screeched up the floor of the ramen shop as Iruka got up and began to leave. Watching Iruka distance himself was a knife to Naruto's heart, a piercing chill that made him feel like he was losing yet another precious person in his life. Panic sparked inside him, and before he could think, he leapt from his seat. "Iruka-sensei." Naruto's hand reached out towards the man. Iruka's feet halted, turning slowly to face the boy with a wave of hurt flickering in his eyes, an unspoken pain that made Naruto freeze in his tracks. Iruka halted, turning back, his eyes haunted by unspoken pain that made Naruto freeze. "I can't talk to you right now, Naruto." The calmness of Iruka's voice was like glass, fragile and sharp, cutting through Naruto's frustration with cruel precision. He could sense the tremor beneath it, the vulnerability hidden beneath layer after layer of hurt. Naruto didn't try to stop him from leaving this time. Days blend together in a blur of gray, time dragging on with an oppressive weight that squeezes the very life from him. The walls of his apartment felt like a tomb, filled with the echo of memories too painful to confront. Sasuke was gone, and Sakura was lost in her training with Granny Tsunade, leaving Naruto feeling abandoned, drifting without purpose. Iruka's absence loomed like a shadow, a constant reminder of their last argument that felt seared into his memory, haunting him, like a ghost he couldn't shake off. Even the old pervy sage had vanished on some distant mission, and Naruto was left alone to drown in the relentless tide of his own misery. Each day stretched painfully, while he lay in bed, regret gnawing at him like a ravenous beast, emptiness overshadowing every fleeting thought. The idea of stepping outside had morphed into an insurmountable burden, heavier than any battle he'd faced with wild confidence. The familiar warmth of Ichiraku's ramen had turned foreign. Just the thought of it made his stomach churn violently, twisting with an ache that clawed at him. Time flowed like a dark, relentless river, dull and lifeless, and with each passing moment, the brightness of his world dimmed further into suffocating gray. The isolation clawed at his soul, a relentless tide threatening to consume him whole. Eventually, his fridge contained nothing but remnants and scraps, left to gather dust. He knew he would have to face the world again, yet the thought of stepping outside anchored him to the ground, like lead pulling him into a dark abyss. He had lost two of his precious people in the span of a mere week, and the weight of their absences bore down on him relentlessly. Each breath felt like a betrayal, a painful reminder of his existence in a world that seemed unbearably barren. He feared that this isolation, a chasm so deep, would swallow him whole. There was a sharp knock on the door, breaking the suffocating silence. "Iruka?" Hope fluttered in his heart for a fleeting moment and flickered as he sauntered towards the door. Could he have come to talk to Naruto? Was he no longer angry with him? A rush of conflicting emotions surged within him, elation mixed with fear, as he picked up his pace. He didn't know whether to celebrate at the thought of seeing his teacher again or to dread the emotional weight of their last exchange. Yet, deep down, even if Iruka had no intention of forgiving him, Naruto wouldn't let the possibility of seeing him again slip away so easily. He couldn't help but let the selfless thought of seeing his teacher again fill him with hope, maybe even joy, as he quickly picked up his pace to the door. With hesitant fingers, he reached for the doorknob, heart racing. Naruto hadn't even bothered to hide the signs of his moping, it was imprinted on his very being. As he opened the door, longing was chiseled into every line of his haggard face. Iruka-sensei. His words died in his throat when he realized the figure standing before him wasn't in fact Iruka, but instead Kakashi. Kakashi-sensei? Naruto's voice cracked from disuse. What do you want? Ma, just checking on my favorite student. Kakashi's bored, indifferent gaze looked back at him, the signature look of nonchalance etched into his features. Well, Kakashi-sensei, you can see I'm doing just fine. The words felt bitter on his tongue. Fingers twitching on the door, he attempted to close it, but Kakashi gently wedged his foot in, stopping him. You haven't left your apartment in days. Aren't you supposed to be training with Jiraiya-sama? Kakashi arched an eyebrow, a hint of concern seeping through his casual demeanor. The pervy sage told me he had something he needed to take care of before we left, Naruto grumbled. I don't know what's so important, but he's being a total jerk. Kakashi hummed thoughtfully, his eyes narrowing as they searched Naruto's. But Naruto couldn't muster the energy to care. The weight of his disappointment, the absence of Iruka, felt like a heavy rock lodged deep in his chest. It was the longest they had been apart, and the hurt was more than he could bear. So, why do you think I was Iruka-sensei? That's none of your business, Kakashi-sensei, he snapped, the irritation leaping forth despite his desolation. Kakashi's gaze softened slightly as he loomed over Naruto. How about we train together then, till Jiraiya-sama returns? It's been a while since we sparred, hasn't it? Naruto hesitated. The thought of Kakashi pushing him to his limits felt like a daunting task, especially when his heart still ached for Iruka's presence. But the stark reality of his loneliness pushed against him like a relentless tide. Really, what else did he have to hold on to? Maybe training with Kakashi wouldn't be so bad. It would distract him from the gnawing thoughts of Iruka, if only for a little while. Maybe, just maybe, it would reignite a spark of purpose in the midst of his despair. Fine, Naruto sighed, the fight seeping out of him. Training Ground 17 was as barren and desolate, and the memorial stone looming solemnly in the center of the training field. Naruto let out a contemptuous scoff as his gaze landed on Kakashi, who was lazily flipping through the pages of his ever-precious Icha book, completely unfazed by the prospect of training. The nerve, really. Hey, Kakashi-sensei, this isn't a book club. Come on, fight me. Naruto shouted as he launched into a sprint, aiming a powerful punch at Kakashi. In a flash, Kakashi sidestepped to the left, the motion so fluid it seemed choreographed. Ma, eager to get started, aren't we? He said nonchalantly, his voice dripping with casual indifference as he took his book in his vest pocket. Frustration bubbling within him, Naruto quickly formed a series of hand signs. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. In an instant, a flurry of Naruto's clones surged forward, forming a chaotic circle around Kakashi before they all charged at him, eager to overwhelm their teacher. The air crackled with energy as they lunged in every direction, ready to tackle him. But like a gust of wind extinguishing a flame, Kakashi dispelled the clones with a powerful burst of chakra, sending them vanishing in puffs of smoke. When Naruto looked again, all that remained in Kakashi's place was a simple log. Damn it. Naruto scans the area, looking for any glimpse of the man. His gaze caught a flash of silver hair darting into the branches of a nearby tree. So, Naruto, what's got you so worked up lately? Kakashi called, perched atop a sturdy branch, the sun filtering through the leaves to create a dappled tapestry around him. It's nothing you should care about. Naruto shot back, sidestepping the question as he sprang up the tree trunk to reach Kakashi. However, the silver-haired man appeared to anticipate this. leaping effortlessly to a neighboring tree branch and initiating a familiar game of cat and mouse. "You say that, yet here you are, eager to spar with me," Kakashi remarked over his shoulder, his words causing Naruto to falter as doubt crept in. What does that have to do with how I'm feeling?" Naruto shouted in anger, pushing himself to move faster. Kakashi landed deftly on the ground, with Naruto hot on his heels. "Well, you've always loved training, but you've been holding back since your last mission with Iruka-sensei." The mere mention of Iruka ignited a fire within Naruto. He lunged at Kakashi, frustration erupting. His fist connected with Kakashi's side, catching the teacher off guard, a fleeting victory that felt hollow. "I have not," Naruto exclaimed, darting to Kakashi's opposite side and aiming a swift side kick. Kakashi remained composed, effortlessly raising his forearm to block the strike, redirecting Naruto's momentum and sending him stumbling back, an action that only fueled the blonde's frustration more. So something did happen between you and Iruka-sensei then?" Kakashi observed, his tone deceptively casual, yet there was some underlying insight in it. Images from their fight came flooding back into Naruto's head. He could get the look Iruka had given him out of his head, the look so despairing and pained. "No, nothing happened, we're fine, we didn't fight." Naruto's voice faltered, a mix of embarrassment and frustration clogging his throat. Heat rose to his cheeks as he squeezed his eyes shut. A tale of indignation and shame was swirling inside him. With a surge of frustration, Naruto unleashed one final, lackluster punch at Kakashi. Holding his fist aloft for a fleeting moment, before slowly letting his arm droop to his side. He stood there as all the tension and fight left his body. A steady hand rested on the boy's shoulder. The action caused his throat to tighten significantly, and he refused to meet the man's eyes. "I'm here to listen, if you want to talk about it." Kakashi's voice was oddly calm and gentle. A tone Naruto realized he rarely heard from anyone, especially from someone like his lazy sensei. Naruto looked up at him, his eyes momentarily blurring before he roughly wiped them with the end of his sleeve. "Well, it's just that Iruka-sensei is being a jerk. He's mad at me for taking a shot for him, but if I hadn't, he would have died." The words burst from him, the intensity of his glare fixed on the ground as if he could do it to absorb his frustration. Kakashi hummed thoughtfully, his attention unwavering. "He sounds like he cares a lot, Naruto," he replied. "Yeah, well, he did it for me, so why is it bad now when I do the same for him?" Naruto grunted, his teeth clenched as he continued to glare at the grass. "Naruto, I think," Kakashi began, but his words were abruptly cut off. Confusion washed over Naruto. Shush, stop talking," Kakashi hissed, raising a hand to his face to cover his mouth. The sudden change in tone made Naruto annoyed. He was trying so hard to get him to talk, and now he wants him to shut up? He reached for Kakashi's wrist, ready to push it away in defiance, but then he caught the gleam of the red Sharingan out from behind his sensei's Hite 8. The sight of it sent a chill down Naruto's spine, a warning that twisted his stomach into knots. Kakashi was scanning their surroundings intently, making Naruto anxious about what was about to happen. He watched his sensei look at the area with an intensity that made him seem like a hawk on the hunt, sleek and predatory. The way he carried himself radiated a sense of authority that Naruto had never consciously acknowledged before. It was both reassuring and infuriating to feel cared for, but most of all, it made him feel weak. Without a moment's hesitation, Kakashi lunged forward, gripping Naruto tightly as they both propelled to the side, barely avoiding the snap of a bright crimson wire that threatened to ensnare them both. A shot of adrenaline surged through Naruto when they both landed to the ground. Out of nowhere, a figure emerged, a strange man with an otherworldly presence. His skin was sickly pale, like paper, and his hair, a bluish silver, was tied up in a messy ponytail. The outfit he wore bore a passing resemblance to that of the Akatsuki, though devoid of color, reduced to shades of white and brown. In one hand, the man wielded a long, glowing red fishing rod. The other held an object he couldn't quite see from afar. Naruto rolled through the ground with an unsettling grace, moving a few feet away from Kakashi because he didn't need him to protect himself. The weird-looking man pointed his long, glowing red rod menacingly at Kakashi. "Well, aren't I lucky?" the stranger sneered, a wide grin spreading across his face, Only one puny little human I have to fight through to get what I need. What's with this guy? Do you think he works with the Akatsuki? Naruto half whispered and half yelled to his sensei, glancing between the combatants, yet Kakashi's focus never wavered from the intruder. I don't know, Naruto, but he looks to be after you, Kakashi replied, urgency threading through his otherwise calm tone. Naruto felt that statement settle heavily in his chest. It was always about him. Of course, he had enemies, but the weight of that truth made him feel more isolated than ever in this moment. The stranger's impatience grew, his attacks intensified and became more aggressive. But Kakashi evaded each strike with fluidity, countering with precision and speed, all the while keeping Naruto anchored securely beside him. Kakashi's body flickered toward the man, landing a precise blow with his kunai, disarming him of what resembled a turtle shell adorned with a red ribbon. The shell clattered to the ground. Damn it, you son of a, the man shouted, glaring at the fallen shell. Seizing the moment, Kakashi launched a powerful kick that sent his adversary crashing into the nearby woods. Wasting no time, Kakashi carried Naruto to the outside of the training ground to the entrances, then sets him down. Naruto, I need you to run and get as far from here as possible, warned the Hokage-sama of the intruder. Naruto's gut squeezed with frustration. Naruto's gut twisted with frustration as he processed the order. It wasn't a bad plan, but Kakashi was doing the same thing as Iruka when they had to fight Mizuki. Sure, Kakashi was strong, stronger than anyone else he had ever met, but the prospect of leaving him to face this threat alone gnawed at him. Not that he'd ever admit to Kakashi that he was worried, but the thought of leaving his sensei to facing this guy alone sent a jolt of anger through Naruto. No, I'm not leaving you to fight that weirdo alone. Not when I can fight, too. Naruto shouted, nails digging into his palms as he stood his ground. I don't know what I was thinking, talking to you about Iruka-sensei, you're just like him. Always looking down on me. Kakashi's expression faltered, confusion mingling with concern. Naruto, what are you talking about? He asked, frustration underlining his tone, but there was also a hint of something more, worry. You both think I'm weak. A weak little kid just begging to be saved. But I'm not. I'm a leaf shinobi of the Hidden Leaf Village. Because I'm going to be Hokage one day, so everyone stop disrespecting me and look up to me. With adrenaline surging, Naruto charged past Kakashi, his heart set on confronting the pale figure that loomed ahead. He could hear Kakashi yelling for him to come back, but in that moment, he was done with everyone looking down on him. He was tired of others wanting him dead for something he couldn't control. He lunged at the man, fists clenched tight. Just as he was about to punch the bastard square in the face, the pale man whipped his rod straight into Naruto's stomach. The world around him froze. It wasn't the physical pain that stopped him, but the suffocating mental pressure as if someone were ripping his lungs from within. The man laughed, yanking the rod free and pulling the agony away with it. Naruto collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. What the hell had just happened? The man's voice broke through his panic. What the? It didn't work. Could it be? A scoff escaped his lips. Very well, you leave me no choice. The rod shot back toward Naruto faster than before, its red tendrils coiling around him like serpents. He tried to twist away, but it was too swift, snagging him and lifting him off the ground. What the? Hey, let me go. Naruto shouted, struggling against the tight grip that held him suspended in the air. The more he fought, the more it tightened, rendering him powerless. The man began muttering to something out of Naruto's view, but he had no time to spare on that. He needed to focus on escaping. His eyes darted to a strange turtle shell that had opened, revealing what looked like a mechanical beast. Its eyes glowed a brilliant yellow as the ribbon around it began to unravel. The shell cracked open, and a bright yellow orb of light started to rise into the air. The man huffed impatiently. God, this thing's so slow, I swear. Before he could finish, a fist collided with his face. Kakashi soared in, kicking the man hard into the ground. Naruto felt a jump of relief, but the tension only grew as the yellow light pulsated, growing larger and more ominous. Kakashi-sensei, watch out! Naruto screamed, panic rising within him as he struggled uselessly against the constricting ropes. The situation was spiraling. Just as the pale man regained his footing to launch another attack at Kakashi, the yellow light surged, expanding to absorb everything around them. Naruto felt the ropes that had bound him vanish, dissolving into thin air, and the reassuring weight of Kakashi's steady grip around him. It was then that he realized, with a jolt, they were plummeting straight down from the sky, the ground rushing up to meet them in a dizzying blur. Naruto felt the blood rush to his head at an insane speed, as the sight began to fade away. Before everything went black, when Naruto finally regained consciousness, he was shrouded in darkness, with only the distant chirping of birds slicing through the silence. A strange warmth enveloped him, but the persistent throbbing in his skull offered no comfort. Groaning, he felt like he had tumbled headfirst down a rocky mountain. Each heartbeat sent shockwaves of pain ricocheting through his skull, making him wince. Feeling strangely suffocated and desperate for fresh air, Naruto huffed in frustration, but a heavy weight pressed down on him. The unpleasant smell of sweat and wet dog invaded his nostrils, making him grimace. Yuck! His mind was made up now. Escape was no longer a choice but a necessity. Naruto twisted and squirmed until he finally managed to wriggle his arms free. Summoning all his strength, he pushed the weight up, trying to throw it off him. As the weight slipped away, he inhaled deeply, savoring the air around him. With a fierce glare, Naruto directed his attention at the figure that had him mashed down, only to discover that it was none other than Kakashi. The silver-haired man appeared to be asleep, his chest rising and falling gently, completely unfazed by being jostled around. Come on, Kakashi-sensei. You almost turned me into a pancake, he exclaimed, irritation bubbling up, and started to shake the man aggressively. Wake up already. We've got way more important things to deal with than you napping in the grass. And some advice, maybe try showering more than just once a month. Plugging his nose, he scooted away from Kakashi with his feet, giving the air around him a dramatic wave. Kakashi stirred, blinking disorientedly as he finally connected with Naruto's annoyed gaze. His eye gleamed with dazed concern for a fleeting moment. Naruto? Great, you're awake. Are you okay? Naruto shot back, crossing his arms with a huff, a fiery annoyance mixing with genuine worry. Don't tell me you've got a concussion on top of that gross dog smell. His words seemed to snap Kakashi out of his daze, as he quickly jumped up to his feet to look around them. Naruto, he exclaimed, what happened? Where'd that enemy nin go? I don't know, Kakashi-sensei. When I woke up, I was kind of stuck under you, so I missed the show, he replied, rolling his eyes at the older shinobi. Kakashi ignored Naruto's comment and shifted his gaze around them. It was exactly the same place, training ground 17, like nothing had even happened. I don't sense that man's presence anywhere, Kakashi muttered, glancing down at Naruto. Well, good riddance. I mean, what was he even trying to do in the first place? Naruto questioned, rubbing the back of his head. It is weird. We're in the exact same spot, but I could have sworn I fell from the sky just a while ago. He sure felt like he did at least. You think it's some weird jutsu, Kakashi-sensei? I don't know, Naruto. But I think that nin was more dangerous than he looked. He replied, his tone flat and unwavering. Well, obviously. He just came out of nowhere and attacked us with a fishing rod. The words tumbled out of his mouth as he glared up at Kakashi from where he sat, crossing his arms defiantly as a pout formed on his lips. Kakashi's gaze wandered again, eyes narrowing as if scanning for potential threats, completely unfazed by Naruto's outburst. The indifference only fueled Naruto's anger. And you didn't even let me fight him. Memories surged in Naruto's mind, the way the attacker had zeroed in on him, the wild, unpredictable energy in the man's eyes. It was humiliating to have been taken down so easily, and he felt robbed of a chance to prove himself. His fists were clenched tightly in the grass, knuckles turning white with frustration. He had been training relentlessly to become stronger, so how could he be expected to grow if he was never given the opportunity to fight? If only Kakashi had given him a moment to think, to react on his own, he could have gotten out of it without any help. I could have handled it, if you had just waited a second before jumping in. He protested, his voice trembling with the effort to keep his frustrations in check. It felt like every disappointment was crashing down on him, compounding his confusion and loneliness. How could his sensei fail to see how crucial it was for him to become stronger? He has to get stronger. Kakashi's gaze shifted from the field to Naruto, confusion flickering in his eye before he raised a hand to rub his temples, letting out a soft sigh. It always annoyed him a bit how his sensei seemed to have this uncanny ability to keep calm under pressure. He always seemed to know what to do and how to do it. Naruto couldn't help but feel a spark of frustration at it. He knew he could handle things just as well, if not better. Yet, no one ever gave him the chance to prove it. Amidst the swirling emotions, Naruto felt an aching loneliness swell inside him. Did anyone even notice how hard he tried? Did they notice how much he craved to be seen as strong? He replayed moments in his mind, the last look Sasuke had given him before he lost consciousness, a storm of anger mixed with a hidden tinge of pity, as if he believed Naruto was simply not strong enough to stop him. He also recalled Iruka's words, and how he still was seen as some weak, helpless kid. Naruto failed them both, because he wasn't strong enough to be viewed as anything except weak. We should probably inform Hokage-sama about this. Kakashi's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. Letting out a mental groan, Naruto thought of having to face Granny Tsunade. She was definitely going to give him an earful for getting himself into this mess in the first place. "Ma, come on," Kakashi says as pulls Naruto up to his feet by the scruff of his jacket. "Let's head back to the village, but stay vigilant, I still don't trust this." Naruto nods reluctantly, as they begin their walk. The trees overhead shielded them from most of the sunlight, creating a soothing canopy. As he walked, he listened to the crunch of sticks and the rustle of dry leaves beneath his feet. The sound was pleasant, much more enjoyable than the thoughts swirling in his mind. As they approached the gates of Konoha, the absence of the familiar guards, Izumo and Katetsu, was immediately noticeable. In their stead stood two guards Naruto had never seen before, instantly setting off alarm bells in his mind. Hey, where'd they go? Did they take the day off, or something? Without hesitation, Kakashi clapped a hand over Naruto's mouth. As Naruto protested, Kakashi swiftly grabbed him by the waist and pulled them both up into a nearby tree, just in time to evade the guard's notice. Naruto glanced up at Kakashi, who had let his hand fall from the blonde's mouth. He noticed that the man's typically relaxed eye was now scanning the area with an intensity that put him on edge. Turning his gaze toward the village, he felt a knot form in his stomach at the sight before him. Construction was rampant. Half-finished buildings loomed like spirits in the sunlight, a chaotic blend of wooden beams and scaffolding scattered throughout the landscape. But the most shocking sight of all was the mountain, where four heads carved into stone loomed ominously. Granny Tsunade's head was completely gone. "What the?" Naruto started to say, confusion forming on his face, but his words were abruptly cut off by a shout echoing from the opposite side, distinct from the two guards. "Hey, come back here." The shout definitely wasn't aimed at them, but Naruto felt a shock of anxiety shoot up his spine nonetheless. He saw as Kakashi turned to the noise and stiffened for a second, then he swiftly grabbed Naruto by the waist, pulling him under his arm and bolting away. "Hey, will you stop picking me up without asking?" Naruto shouted, struggling to wriggle free, desperate to catch a glimpse of who had shouted. But Kakashi's grip was unyielding, and in fact, it only tightened as they leapt over trees and sprinted through the underbrush. Eventually, they burst into a random clearing in the woods, where Kakashi finally set Naruto down. The blonde immediately jumped back, dusting himself off before thrusting an accusatory finger at Kakashi. "Okay, Kakashi-sensei. Obviously, you know something. I mean, why were there different guards at the gate? Why did we run away from that voice? He could have spotted that weird fishing rod guy. And why does the village look like that? Where's Granny Tsunade's Hokage head thingy?" Questions poured out of Naruto's mouth like a tidal wave. He could feel that something was off, and he was convinced that Kakashi knew the answers he was searching for. "Naruto, can you please just stop talking for a second?" Kakashi finally said, exhaling as he rubbed his temple, looking more weary than usual. "No, what's going on?" Naruto insisted, determination slipping through the cracks of his frustration. "You can't just leave me in the dark like this." "All right," Kakashi replied, his voice steady but heavy with gravity. This might sound a bit out there, but he spoke slowly before placing his hands firmly on Naruto's shoulders. "I believe we've somehow traveled back in time." Naruto froze, the words striking him like lightning. Traveled back in time. His mind raced as the words echoed repeatedly in his head. He grappled with trying to understand everything, torn between the ridiculousness of the claim and the glimpses of truth reflected in Kakashi's demeanor. How could that even be possible? "Are you sure you didn't knock your head during that fall?" he finally asked, his voice tinged with a mix of concern and skepticism. Kakashi knitted his brows in concentration as he collected his thoughts before continuing. The village, he hesitated briefly, as if searching for the right words. The village appeared just as it did in the aftermath of the Kyuubi attack, perhaps only a couple of years later. An uncomfortable weight settled in Naruto's stomach at the mention of the Kyuubi attack. Memories swept over him, the villagers' angry glares, the way they looked at him with disdain. It was as if he could hear their sharp words echoing in his mind, the hushed whispers branding him a monster, as though he were the root of their suffering. Naruto shook his head violently, pushing those thoughts aside. Dwelling on the past wouldn't help them now, he needs to prove those people wrong. He's not a monster. He's a shinobi of the Hidden Leaf. So, what's the plan? We can't just hang out here. We should find a way back home or… First things first, Kakashi interrupted, scanning their surroundings again. We need to gather information. We should avoid drawing attention to ourselves until we figure out what's going on. We'll probably need some sort of disguise, so people from this timeline don't recognize us. Naruto pouted. It was kinda ironic that Kakashi, of all people, was talking about people recognizing them when he only ever showed 3/4 of his face. Okay, fine. Disguises it is. Now where do we go on finding those? Kakashi released a thoughtful hum. Well, I know of an old abandoned house somewhere towards the outskirts of the village. Maybe we might find some clothes there, and it'll keep us hidden for now. He glanced around, ensuring they weren't being watched. Come on, let's go. Kakashi waved his hand, moving forward without looking back to see if Naruto was behind him. With a frustrated sigh, Naruto hurried to catch up. Kakashi-sensei, we've been walking for forever. Naruto whined, dragging his feet as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. He tilted his head back, eyes pleading for a glimmer of empathy from his sensei, but Kakashi remained unfazed, his gaze fixed ahead, completely absorbed in whatever thoughts occupied his mind. We're almost there, he replied, his voice calm and measured, not bothering to even glance back at Naruto as he spoke. You've said that like the last 12 times I've asked. Naruto huffed, arms crossed defiantly, narrowing his eyes as he squared his shoulders. The blonde observed as his sensei effortlessly jumped over a fallen tree, almost as if it didn't even register in his mind. He landed gracefully on the other side, while Naruto couldn't help but scowl, feeling a pang of envy at how effortlessly cool he was. PSH, he could do that too. Fueled by stubborn determination, he charged toward the tree, intent on leaping over it just as Kakashi had done. However, his foot caught on the trunk, and he stumbled forward with a startled yelp, desperately flailing his arms to regain balance. A wave of fear washed over him, and he instinctively braced himself for the impact. But instead of crashing to the ground, Naruto felt the familiar grip of Kakashi's hand at the back of his jacket collar. His limbs hung limp in the air, as if he were a mischief-making kitten being scolded. The blonde unlatches himself and jumps back a few feet away from Kakashi, scowling as he looks up at the man with a glare. I didn't need your help, Kakashi-sensei. I had everything under control. The silver-haired man raised an eyebrow. Oh really? Because from where I was standing, it seemed like you were on the verge of becoming one with the earth, Kakashi remarked with a smirk peeking through his mask. Naruto's cheeks burned with frustration and embarrassment. He couldn't believe the nerve of his sensei. How could he be expected to retrieve Sasuke back to the leaf and be seen as a real shinobi to Iruka when he couldn't even manage to leap over a fallen tree without losing balance? Was he really that pathetic? They continue on forward in silence, Naruto's frustration mounting while he kicks at stray rocks along the path. The distance seemed to stretch on endlessly, each step feeling like a slog through molasses. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime of trudging, they stopped at a dilapidated old fence. We're here, Kakashi said before leaping over the fence with ease. Naruto cautiously made his way up to the fence. The wood was splintered, and although it didn't appear entirely abandoned, it wasn't exactly well kept either. A twinge of anxiety tugged at his gut. Grabbing the top of the fence, he clambered over, landing in the yard with caution. His eyes darted around, taking in the overgrown grass and weeds that swayed in the wind. Kakashi-sensei, this looks like someone's backyard. Are you sure it's still abandoned? Ma, I'm positive it is. Trust me, Kakashi replied, his tone suddenly distant and bitter, catching the blonde a little off guard. Naruto hesitated. Okay. But if someone comes out and throws a kunai or shuriken at you, don't say I didn't warn you, he murmured, anxiety pooling in his stomach. We'll be fine. Just follow my lead, he replied, his tone dismissive. Although the man's mask partially concealed his face, the seriousness etched into his expression was clear as they pressed on. Kakashi moved onto the deck of the house without a hint of hesitation, sliding the shoji door open smoothly as it made a soft whoosh sound. Inside, the house's aura was cold, but inviting and yet also undeniably worn. It spoke of a once vibrant life that had faded over time. How did you figure out where this place was, anyway? Naruto asked, trailing behind his sensei, who navigated the path effortlessly like he'd done it countless times before. Kakashi offered no reply, simply continuing deeper into the dusty structure. Naruto huffed, annoyed. Fine. If his sensei wasn't going to tell him anything, he'd just look around and figure it out himself. Slipping away from Kakashi's silent form, the blonde ducked into a hallway at the opposite end of the house. It felt heavy and dead, the air thick with disuse, as if no one had stepped foot down the corridor in years. An eerie silence clung to the walls, making him feel a little cold. At the far end of the hall stood a set of double sliding doors. They looked like nothing out of the ordinary, blending in with the rest of the house. But Naruto felt an unsettling feeling upon seeing them, like all the weird energy originated from behind those doors. A prickle of anxiety crawled up Naruto's neck as he slowly approached them. His hand reached out gently to the handle, fingers brushing the cool wood. A hand clamped down on his wrist, tight and sudden, sending Naruto jumping out of his skin with a startled yelp. "Don't go in there." Kakashi's voice was low, a tone Naruto had never heard from him before. Looking up, Naruto saw his sensei's visible eye wide, not just with anger, but a flicker of something that looked askance to fear. As if opening those doors would cause the whole world to explode. Naruto froze, mind reeling. He felt like a rabbit caught in a fox's gaze, thoughts scattering like dust motes. He couldn't think, couldn't figure out what to say. But Kakashi would never intentionally hurt him, right? Time moved slowly, neither of them moved from where they stood. Naruto just started at Kakashi with wide eyes, unblinking. Abruptly, Kakashi released Naruto's wrist as if he'd been burned, staring at his hand slowly before quickly looking back at Naruto, who hadn't moved. It's just. We should just get the stuff we need and get out. No need to go exploring. He finished with a strained, awkward laugh. Come on, Naruto. Kakashi waved him over, already turning back the way they'd come. Upon the sudden shift, Naruto let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding in, then slowly made his way towards the direction his sensei went, casting daunting glances back at the man every few steps. Soon, they found themselves standing in the doorway of what looked like a small bedroom. Naruto paused, taking in the sparse space. The room was simple. A small futon lay neatly in the far corner, and a single sliding door on the opposite wall hinted at a compact bathroom beyond. Soon enough, they stepped into what seemed to be a small bedroom. Naruto paused at the doorway, taking in the space around him. The room was simple, with a twin-size futon placed in the far corner, and a sliding door on the opposite side hinted at a compact bathroom beyond. Naruto's gaze returned to Kakashi, who was now rummaging through a small closet, pushing aside a collection of neatly hung clothes. The scent of aged wood and faint hints of lavender filled the air. "So Kakashi-sensei, what's the plan now?" he asked, bouncing on the ottoman before plopping down and swinging his feet back and forth casually. I think I have a bit of stuff in here to help with my disguise," he said, still running through the closet before kneeling down and pulling open one of the drawers. There it is," he said, pulling out a small box and sitting down in front of Naruto to show him. "A box?" the blonde said, looking down at it and Kakashi with an unimpressed look. Kakashi set the box down on the floor, and opened it up to retrieve a wavy wig in a soft, brown rose color along with 4 vibrant purple stickers and what looked to be an eye contact container. "What are those for?" he asked, tilting his head in question. The sparkle in his eyes grew brighter as he scooted a little closer, completely forgetting his earlier doubt. "For this," Kakashi declared, grinning as he placed the wig on his head. Naruto watched Kakashi's silver hair get replaced with the brown wavy wig. And then, surprising Naruto even further, Kakashi lifted his mask just enough to reveal the lower half of his face. There was an unusual warmth in his features that Naruto had not expected, marked by a small mole by his lip that made Kakashi seem more friendly and approachable. Kakashi put the purple stickers over his eyelids, perfectly concealing the scar on his left eye before he slipped in the greeny-gray colored contact lenses. "Whoa, you just showed me your face. Wait a second," Naruto exclaimed, disbelief washing over him as he squinted at Kakashi. He pointed an accusatory finger at his sensei's chest, a mixture of shock and disbelief bubbling inside him. "Hey, you were Sukeye this whole time and didn't tell me?" The Jonin just blinked at Naruto as he began to thread his hands through his own hair, eyes squeezed shut, as he looked up in misery. "That means I've seen your face this whole time and I didn't know. I feel like an idiot now." Kakashi chuckled softly at the boy and then shrugged off his flak jacket, plopping it down next to his Hite-8. "Ma, we should probably do something with your face too, right?" he said casually, rummaging through the box, probably looking for something to find. "Huh, are you talking about my whiskers?" Naruto said, rubbing his cheek, hearing as his sensei hummed like-mindedly. Kakashi's gaze shifted from the contents of the box to glance around the room. With a thoughtful look, he pulled out a black snug-fitting neck gaiter attached to a sleeveless shirt. "Here, you can use my mask, though it is connected to my shirt if that's okay," Kakashi said before taking a closer look at it. Maybe there's a smaller size somewhere else here," he mumbled, beginning to look towards the closet and rummaging through it. "Ew, are you serious? That thing probably smells 100 times worse than you do." Naruto wrinkled his nose and waved his hand to keep it at arm's length. What on earth were Kakashi's masks doing in this house anyways, and why in different sizes? Not like Kakashi would tell him, Naruto thought, rolling his eyes. "Well, we don't really have any other options, do we?" Emerging from the closet triumphantly, he held up what appeared to be a slightly smaller version of the neck gaiter. "Besides, I haven't worn this one in years, so. No, there is no way," Naruto said as he used both hands to keep Kakashi from coming closer. "Naruto," he said, hesitating to step closer, "it's really not that bad." "Nope, no way. Not in a million years am I wearing that." With an exasperated leap, Naruto sprung up from the ottoman, putting distance between himself and the relentless Kakashi. "Come on, Naruto. Let's not complicate things," Kakashi expressed with soft impatience. Something about Kakashi's words made Naruto hesitate. Wearing the shirt was useful for the mission, and only a child would get upset over something so trivial. He didn't want to give Iruka or Kakashi any indication that he was still a helpless kid. Maybe by wearing it, he'd even pick up some of Kakashi's skills. After all, it was only for as long as they stayed here, just until they got back. After a moment of contemplation, Naruto let out a determined huff and said, "All right, fine." The blonde ripped off his jacket and put the shirt on. He put the mask part over his nose and took a breath. To his surprise, it felt oddly comfortable and was easy to exhale though. Not that he'd ever tell Kakashi that though. It smells like an old dusty house in here." Naruto coughed dramatically as he complained. "Why don't you not wear a shirt under your jacket?" Kakashi asked, his gaze fixed on Naruto with a blank stare, confusion etched on his features. "Only losers wear shirts," Naruto shot back defiantly, grabbing his jacket off the floor and zipping it back up on him, before fixing the mask on his face and crossing his arms with a stubborn pout. "Ma," Kakashi said, as he watched as the boy made his way back to his spot on the ottoman. The Jonin glanced down for a moment, shaking his head slightly before moving on. "I think it might be a good idea to come up with a fake name for you, since I'll be going by Sukeye." Naruto stared, a frown creasing his brow. "But aren't I like, too? I mean, I know a lot of people in the village hate me, but most of them won't even know my name yet, right? We have to stay cautious, Naruto. Even if it's just a few who know your name, they are still aware of it, and that could lead to serious consequences for us," Kakashi asserted firmly. "Right," Naruto spoke slowly before pondering for a moment. "Well, if I have to pick a new name, I want to be called Ramen." Kakashi stared at Naruto, his expression flat. "What did I just say about being careful?" He let out a sigh and rubbed the back of his head. "How about we think of a ramen topping? Since your name is Naruto, like Narutomaki, it shouldn't be too strange." Naruto tilted his head, a look of confusion crossing his face. Wah. So like Menma or Chashu or something. Menma doesn't sound bad, Kakashi hummed thoughtfully, let's go with that. Naruto straightened up at the man's words. What? No. Menma is so gross. Can't I be Chashu or Ajitsuke Tama? He whined, getting up from his floor to pull at Kakashi's arm. I think Menma has a nice ring to it, and besides, we're not going to try getting buddy-buddy with anyone. It's just a precaution for if we do run into someone. So it doesn't really matter anyway. Kakashi said as he stood up to put everything they had brought out back in its place. A huff escaped Naruto's lips. Fine, whatever, he grumbled, crossing his arms in frustration. Okay, now give me your Hite 8, and then we can finally head out of here. Kakashi said nonchalantly, dusting his hands off before he went to reach for the Hite 8 around his forehead. Naruto felt his heart plummet. He backed away from his sensei immediately. What? No, I want to keep it on. His fingers instinctively clutched the Hite 8, the fabric feeling worn and familiar beneath his grip. Naruto, we have to pretend like we're not from the leaf. You're going to have to take it off. Kakashi's tone was firm but patient. No, it's mine, you can't have it. Naruto's grip tightened around his Hite 8. He knew it was childish to argue about it, but it was a precious token from Iruka, a symbol of everything he'd worked for. Iruka was one of the few who believed in him, and he wasn't about to let that go. I'm not trying to take it from you, Naruto, but you can't have that thing on. No, Iruka-sensei gave it to me. And I swore to myself that I would wear it on every single mission I'm on to show that I'm a shinobi from the Hidden Leaf Village. His voice was louder now, a mix of defiance and desperation. Kakashi rubbed his temples, sounding tired. Naruto, we really don't have time for this. Well, this may mean nothing to you, Kakashi-sensei. But it does to me. Naruto roughly rubs his eyes in anger with the end of his sleeve that he just realized they were watering up before sprang to his feet. Adrenaline coursing through him, he gave Kakashi a stubborn glare, and he bolted from the room. Naruto. Kakashi called out urgently, his voice resonating through the dimly lit hallway behind him. He could hear hurried footsteps and the sound of stumbling getting closer before Naruto forcefully slammed the wooden sliding door shut. His heart raced, pumping adrenaline through his veins, fueling his every movement as he dashed through the forest. The scenery around him became a vibrant blur of greens and browns as he pushed forward. He leapt over roots that jutted out from the ground like ancient fingers, narrowly avoiding scrapes. Get back here! Kakashi's voice rang out behind him, firm yet pleading, chasing after him like an echo through the trees. The sound of Kakashi's footsteps grew louder, thudding against the forest floor, but Naruto was focused. He was determined not to let his sensei catch him. No, he yelled, pushing harder, his feet dancing over the uneven terrain. He felt the wind rush past, cool against his skin, and he leapt over a fallen log, barely managing to clear it. Glancing back, he saw the man Kakashi was dressed up as, just a few paces behind, his expression a mixture of urgency and exasperation. Naruto dove beneath the low-hanging branches of a nearby tree, the leaves whipping past his face. He barely heard Kakashi's voice behind him, muffled by the rustle of the leaves. Come on, Naruto. But the blonde wasn't listening. Driven by a wild mix of emotions, he hurtled forward with a fierce determination, feeling invincible in the moment. Branches scratched at his jacket arms, but he pushed on. Through the thicket, he spotted a clearing ahead and decided to risk it, darting toward it with all his might. His heart thudded in his chest as he burst into the open, sunlight flooding over him, illuminating the path ahead. Just as he was about to slow down, he heard a sudden crash behind him, a noise that made his pulse quicken. Kakashi came tumbling through the underbrush, nearly caught in a hidden trap. A rope snagged one of his sandals, sending him teetering off balance before he managed to break free and now was rolling down the slope. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise as Kakashi careened toward him. The sight was almost comical, but he couldn't laugh, not when his sensei was barreling straight for him. Naruto screamed and tried to sprint faster down the hill to avoid being caught in the chaos of Kakashi's impending crash. Ahead, he spotted a glistening river at the end of the hill, but standing in front of it was a boy, leaning casually against a tree. If Naruto didn't warn this guy about Kakashi, the boy would surely topple right into the river. Hey, watch out! The blonde shouted, waving his hands around in hopes to catch the kid's attention. The kid, who had been talking and laughing to himself, turned at Naruto's frantic call. Confusion quickly morphed into surprise as he blinked at the unexpected commotion. And at that moment, Naruto felt something twist in his stomach as he got a closer look at the kid. It couldn't be. He froze for just a heartbeat, but that split second proved to be fatal. Kakashi collided into him with a jarring impact, and together, they tumbled down the slope, crashing straight into the unsuspecting boy. With a splash, Naruto found himself submerged in the river, gasping for air as he broke the surface, soaked and bewildered. He could feel Kakashi's grip tighten on his jacket as he was pulled from the chilly water, but his attention was drawn to a rough tug at his hite, which had been stuffed deep into Kakashi's jacket pocket. "Hey, give that back," Naruto shouted, his voice a mix of frustration and desperation as he kicked his legs in the air. He stretched out his arms, fingertips barely grazing the fabric of Kakashi's jacket, which hung just out of reach. The grip Kakashi had on his own jacket kept him suspended helplessly. "What did I tell you about running off like that?" Kakashi stammered, his usually calm demeanor thrown off kilter, trying to regain composure. "Look, now your clothes are all soaked. I don't care. Just give it back," Naruto shouted, thrashing in Kakashi's hold. He paused, confusion furrowing his brow. "What the? How did you manage to stay dry?" "I don't think that matters," Kakashi began, but Naruto was already cutting him off. "But, hey," the voice rang out, snapping Naruto's attention back to the scene before him. The boy they had collided with rose from the riverbank, shaking off droplets of water that sparkled from the sun. He looked unhurt, but his expression was a mix of annoyance and incredulity, one Naruto recognized all too well. Iruka. It was Iruka, unmistakably younger, his messy brown hair pulled back into a ponytail and his bangs curtaining off to show the middle of his forehead. The younger Iruka still sported the familiar scar along his nose and, while he still appeared older than Naruto, probably by 2 or 3 years, there was a striking sense of familiarity that made Naruto's heart skip a beat in shock. "Before you two start arguing, shouldn't you show a bit of sympathy to the person you just crashed into?" Naruto and Kakashi exchanged glances, their expressions frozen in disbelief as they processed the unexpected interruption. An awkward silence enveloped the trio, the only sounds being the distant rustle of leaves and the faint hum of the wind. Iruka fidgeted slightly, his cheeks flushing under their intense gaze. With a frustrated puff of air, he let out an exasperated huff. Kakashi seemed to snap back to reality at that moment, gently setting Naruto down next to him before bowing respectfully to Iruka. "We apologize for dragging you into our mess." Naruto continued to stare blankly at Iruka, until Kakashi placed his hand on the back of his head, gently pushing it to mimic his bow, "and also for knocking you into the river," he added, looking up a little to meet Iruka's eyes. "We didn't intend to disrupt your, Kakashi's voice trailed off as he faltered mid-sentence. Curious, Naruto glanced up as well, only to notice Iruka wasn't alone. Beside the tree where his younger sensei stood was an ANBU, tied securely to a thick branch on the tree like a holiday turkey. Naruto felt as though his brain was piecing itself back together, and before he could catch himself, he blurted out, "Oh my god. Did you do that? That's hilarious." Laughter bubbled up within him as he turned to Iruka, his eyes shining with delight. Iruka rubbed at the scar along his nose, looking bashful but undeniably proud. "Well, yeah, I did," he admitted shyly, unable to suppress the hint of pride coloring his voice. He remembers the times Iruka would share stories of his early teenage pranks on the ANBU, but he never revealed the details on how he went about doing them. Even when Naruto pleaded with him and promised to swap his beloved ramen for vegetables, Iruka remained firm, insisting he didn't want Naruto to get any ideas. Giggling uncontrollably, Naruto leaned in closer to get a better look at the ANBU. The figure had spiky silver hair that crowned his head, and surprisingly, he was not as tall as most ANBU Naruto had seen. In fact, he was almost the same height as Iruka, maybe even slightly taller. However, what truly caught Naruto's attention was the mask that hid ANBU's face. It almost seemed to resemble a dog, with its perky ears and mouth that mirrored the animal's features. "Okay Menma, we should probably get going." Kakashi coughed into his hand awkwardly as he spoke. "No wait, you gotta teach me how you did that." Ignoring Kakashi entirely, Naruto snapped his attention away from the ANBU to face Iruka, quickly grabbing a hold of the boy's hand as his eyes alight with excitement. Both Kakashi and Iruka stared at him in disbelief, and after a beat, Iruka rubbed his scar with his free hand. "Well, I suppose I can," he replied, looking at Naruto with a mix of embarrassment and pride. "This is a waste of time," came a muffled voice from the edge of the group. Immediately, everyone turned their attention to the sound. To Naruto's surprise, it was the silver-haired ANBU wearing a mask that oddly resembled a dog who had spoken. Without uttering a word, the ANBU swiftly drew a kunai concealed in his pant leg and sliced through his bindings with ease. "This is your final warning to stop meddling with the ANBU, Unimo," he threatened, rubbing his wrists as he advanced menacingly toward Iruka. He then turned to Kakashi and Naruto, an aura of skepticism seeping through him. "And who are you people? Why are you two roaming around the outskirts of Konoha?" His suspicion was evident as he spoke. Whatever Kakashi was going to say was swiftly interrupted with an angry Iruka. "Meddling?" He scoffed loudly, crossing his arms. "It's just a prank. It's not like I'm hurting anyone. And it's not my fault you keep falling for them." He shot back defiantly, a fiery spark in his eyes. "Your pranks are nothing but childish antics and are a complete waste of the ANBUs," the ANBU retorted, now completely focused on Iruka. His voice low, as he leaned in closer, encroaching on Iruka's personal space with an accusatory finger. Yet, instead of backing down, Iruka matched his glare with a fierceness, getting so close as that their foreheads were almost touching. "Childish, huh? Little do you know, laughter is what keeps us alive. You wouldn't understand, hound. That laughter isn't what's going to protect you in battle," the ANBU, hound, shot back, his tone flat, as if he were stating a fact rather than engaging in an argument. Naruto stared, confused, as they argued. He felt a hand land on his shoulder, causing him to jump. He looked up, startled, only to realize it was Kakashi, albeit dressed as Sukeya. He forgot his sensei was still there. "We should probably leave them to there." Kakashi paused, glancing at the pair with a hint of concern etched in his brows. Conversion. As Iruka let out a frustrated yell, Naruto shifted his attention from Kakashi to Iruka, who had stepped back from the ANBU, snapped his gaze onto the blonde, clearly focused on him now. "Hey, kid, you still want to learn how to pull pranks?" he said, storming up to Naruto with burning passion in his eyes. Naruto gleamed at the words, shaking his head at lightning speed before saying, "Yes." "Are you going to teach me?" "Nah Menma. No, we have to." "Yeah, here's your first lesson." Iruka introduced and Naruto watched as he pulled out something from his pocket. A good prankster always has a plan B. "Amino, don't you dare." Before anyone could react, Iruka hurled what looked like a seal onto the ground. In an instant, the world around them erupted into a cloud of gray smoke. A hand suddenly wrapped around Naruto's wrist, yanking him forcefully through the swirling tendrils of smoke that hung heavy in the air. As they burst into clearer surroundings, Naruto glanced up to see who had grabbed him, and he felt his heart soar when he recognized it was Iruka, leading the way as they sprinted, determination etched across his face. Amidst the chaotic swirl of thick, dark smoke and a rush of exhilaration, he could faintly hear Kakashi and Hound calling out their names, with some coughing from Kakashi and frustration evident in Hound's voice. Curiosity pulled at him, urging him to turn his head and take a glance back. Through the haze, he caught sight of their figures, struggling to find their way through the murky tempest. Yet, just as quickly as he spotted them, their silhouettes disappeared into the shadows, swallowed by the forest's gloom. With adrenaline pumping through their veins, Naruto and Iruka pressed further into the woods, driven by a sense of urgency and purpose. Eventually, Iruka and Naruto began to slow their pace, finally coming to a breathless halt when they reached the front gates of Konoha. Before quickly hiding in a bush as the guards walked by. After being sure the guards could hear Naruto excitedly, exclaimed, "That was amazing, Unimo-sensei," he said, catching himself before almost slipping up. "Sensei," Iruka echoed softly, rubbing his scar, a pink flush creeping to his cheeks. "Yeah, you've got to teach me how you did that," Naruto exclaimed, his eyes wide, radiant with anticipation. He bounced on his feet, fists clenched with excitement, the energy of the moment making him feel invincible. "Well, all I did was a simple fuinjutsu, that's something you learn at the academy," Iruka shrugged, but then a look of realization washed over his face. Oh, wait, you're not from Konoha, right? I guess not. Naruto felt his stomach twist into knots. It kinda sucked that he had to lie to one of his previous people, even if it wasn't really him. Where are you from anyway? Naruto stiffened momentarily, recalling how Kakashi would usually swoop in with a quick lie. But this time, he had to rely on his own skills. Not that Noro needed him to be there to lie. He can easily come up with stuff on the spot. Maybe. With a grin, he replied, just a place far away. Keeping it vague had always worked for Kakashi, after all, so why not him? Iruka stared at him, confusion knitting his brows together. I see, Iruka replied, scratching his head in bemusement. Hey, how are we supposed to get past the guards without being spotted? Naruto quickly switched subjects, the rules of entering and leaving the village spinning through his mind like a storm. He didn't want to linger on the topic of false identities any longer. Iruka smirked, as if waiting for him to ask that very question. A glint of mischief sparkled in his eyes as he pulled out 2 paper seals from between his fingers, presenting them like a magician revealing a secret trick. Like this. In a quick motion, he slapped a seal on Naruto's forehead and another on his own. Suddenly, Iruka vanished before Naruto's eyes, and a wave of panic crashed over him. Sensei, where'd you go? He half whispered, half yelled, searching frantically, before realizing he couldn't see his arms or the rest of his body. Where's my body? Cool, huh? Iruka's familiar voice broke through the haze, sounding like it came from another dimension. Huh? You mean those seals made us invisible? Naruto questioned quickly before the thrill of discovery surged through him, the fear replaced by excitement. Awesome. Hey, who's there? A guard's voice called out, interrupting the moment. Come on, Menma, we need to get out of here before he spots us. Iruka's urgency cut through the adrenaline-filled air. Without a second thought, Naruto bolted past the guard, adrenaline surging through his veins. With Iruka somewhere in front of him, he raced away from the gates, feeling the rush of freedom fill his lungs. Once they were a good distance away, Naruto slowed down, hands on his knees, panting as if he had just completed a marathon. His eyes widened in awe as he noticed the seal slowly gliding off his forehead like a feather in the wind. Panic rose in his chest as he lunged to grab it, but it was plucked away by a taller figure. His furious gaze locked onto Iruka, who stood there with a smug smile, a hand on his hip, clearly savoring the moment. All of Naruto's annoyance faded instantly, replaced by a bright grin that mirrored Iruka's pride. Pretty cool, huh? Iruka began, glancing at the seal before returning his gaze to Naruto. He sighed dramatically, a playful grumble escaping his lips. Man, all this running is making me hungry. Wanna grab some ramen together? A hint of nervousness crept into Iruka's voice, making Naruto's heart flutter in joy. Did he really want to spend more time with him? Hesitation flickered for a split second before it vanished into pure, unfiltered enthusiasm. Ramen? Yes, please. Naruto exclaimed, as if he were being offered a treasure. He stared at Iruka, seeing him in an entirely new light, a mentor, a friend, almost like he was a hero. The nervousness slipped away, and in its place, he saw Iruka's excitement blossom as they prepared to venture further into the village. Oh, okay, I know the perfect place. You're going to love it. Iruka beamed, leading the way with newfound enthusiasm. Here it is, Iruka exclaimed, putting his arms out in front of Ichiraku ramen as if he was revealing a masterpiece. The atmosphere buzzed with energy, as the enticing aroma of steaming broth and freshly cooked noodles filled the air. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow over the lively streets as it prepared to sink below the horizon. Iruka turned to the blonde with an eager look, but before Naruto could say anything, a voice called out from behind them. See guys? I told you we'd find him here, came an eerily familiar voice that sent a shiver down Naruto's spine. He turned to see a group of teenagers approaching them, with the one speaking being a much younger Mizuki. He even had the same wise smirk that Naruto remembered all too well. Oh, hey guys. Iruka greeted, a hint of enthusiasm in his voice, although he seemed a bit wary. He rubbed the back of his neck and smiled, seeming to try to soothe his nerves. I just got back from another prank on the ANBU. Mizuki sauntered closer, his sardonic smile widening. Oh, that's fantastic. Another one of Iruka's impressive pranks. To anyone else it would sound like a compliment, but Naruto heard the drip of sarcasm in it. Did anyone actually find it funny this time, or was it just you giggling while the ANBU rolled their eyes? Mizuki tilted his head, feigning innocence while chuckling at his own joke. Iruka's smile faltered for a moment, but he looked to quickly recover, shrugging it off, and upon seeing that Naruto shifted uncomfortably, trying to control himself from saying something stupid to Mizuki. Still messing with the ANBU? Another boy from the group chimed in, a senbon dangling carelessly from his mouth like it was a toothpick. He tilted his head, squinting up at the now setting sun as if it might hold some profound secret, before looking back over with a sly smirk. You know, Iruka, you've got to keep those guys guessing. If they see you coming, it's game over. You should spice things up a little. Awa, don't listen to Genma, Iruka. You know, the Hokage can't always back you up when things go south. A girl with purpley black hair in a ponytail similar to Iruka chimed in, grinning as she playfully tugged on Iruka's ear. Naruto vaguely recognized her as one of the Jonin who'd helped run the Chunin exams not too long ago. Hey, Iruka, what's with the pipsqueak? Mizuki asked, crossing his arms as he shot a questioning glance at Naruto. Who are you calling a pipsqueak? Five-head. Seeing Mizuki, teenager or not, made Naruto's blood boil, and he immediately lost all the control he had to keep cool. Memories flashed in his mind of how he betrayed his sensei and almost killed them both, twice. The group turned, all eyes darting to Naruto, and for a heavy moment, silence engulfed them all. But then, a melodic laugh broke through, spilling from the girl's lips. She stumbled a bit before falling on the ground, her happiness radiating outwards and pulling her friends into the light-hearted moment. All except Mizuki, whose glare could chill a fire as he focused intently on Naruto. Five-head? Damn, the purpley black-haired girl howled, clutching her stomach as she struggled to regain her composure, while Iruka helped her up. Where'd you find this kid, Iruka? He's ruthless. I love it, she exclaimed, wiping tears from her eyes, before slapping Iruka's back hard, making him wince. Yeah, I've never seen him around the village before. The boy with a senbon in his mouth said, raising an eyebrow while still having a mostly cunning expression on his face. I ran into him in the woods. He saw my prank on the ANBU and wanted me to teach him, Iruka replied, a faint blush rising to his cheeks from the attention, and a hint of pride creeping into his voice. Geez, Iruka, you really have to stop with these childish pranks, you know, Mizuki said, shaking his head as if he were a disappointed parent. Not only are you letting in strays, but you still haven't made it to Chunin. At this rate, you'll be a genin for the rest of your life. I can't help but worry, everyone else from our class has already made it to Chunin. Mizuki sounded concerned, but Naruto could hear the condescending tone buried deep inside his voice, as if he were speaking from some lofty pedestal of superiority. Irritation simmered within Naruto. It was hard to wrap his head around why everyone kept calling Iruka's pranks childish. Why didn't they get it? Awa, shut up, Five-head. The girl shot back, teased, playfully smacking the back of Mizuki's head with her hand. She smiled with a mischievous glint in her eyes, her grin seeming to light up her face. I think it's adorable you have a little fan, Iruka. She bent down to Naruto's level, her voice dripping with a mock conciliatory tone, like she was addressing a wayward toddler. So, what's your name, little fella? Hey, I'm not some little kid, lady, he snapped, trying to deflect all the attention now on him, distantly feeling his cheeks flushing slightly. The girl took a deep breath, clearly a little taken aback but seeming to keep her composure. You know, kid, I don't really like your tone. She stood up a bit and put her hands on her hips, looking down at Naruto, her strained smile not really fooling anyone. I'm trying to be nice here. You don't need to get all worked up, okay? I'm just asking for your name. Why should I tell you? Naruto challenged again. He knew he should just give the girl his name, and he normally would. But Mizuki's presence was just making him so on edge, it was harder to control what came out his mouth. Because it's polite, kid. I mean, come on. The girl insisted, her arms spreading out exaggeratingly. Her tight smile is now replaced with an annoyed frown. I'm not asking for your life story, here. Just your name. She bent down again to poke him in the chest lightly with a pointed finger, but the blonde didn't falter. You're a tough little guy, but I'm just trying to chat with you. Oh yeah? Well, come on, let's not fight, Iruka interjected, feigning sternness while a smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth as he pushed her hand away from Naruto, Everyone, this is Menma. Like the ramen topping? The Senbon boy quipped, raising an eyebrow. Iruka rolled his eyes with a giggle at the guy's comment before continuing. The guy with the senbon permanently stuck in his mouth is Genma, who merely shrugged and twirled the senbon, raising his other eyebrow with a knowing smirk. The loud, hot-headed girl who can have snake hands over there is Anko. Iruka continued. Anko crossed her arms, a satisfied grin playing on her lips, probably because she got to get Naruto's name. And the one with the big forehead hidden under his hite-8 is Mizuki, Iruka finished, eliciting a chuckle from Genma and Anko while Mizuki smiled tightly, his laughter coated with an edge of something sharper. Nice to meet you guys. I'm not just some kid. Ima be Hokage of my village one day, Naruto said proudly, putting his hands on his hips as he beamed brightly. Normally he would say Konoha, but the teens already thought he was an outsider, no reason to make them believe otherwise. He, weirdly enough, found himself enjoying talking to Iruka's childhood friends. They were pretty laid back and teased one another, but not enough to actually hurt anyone's feelings. It was nice, until he heard Mizuki speak up again. Menma, he said the name as if he were testing it out, making Naruto glare at him. What a weird name for such a weird little boy, Mizuki jeered, and Naruto felt a pang as the mockery bit deeper than it should have. Genma leaned back, clearly enjoying what he probably thought was banter. What's considered weird really depends on perspective, my friend. Being honest here, being named after a food is oddly cool, he said nonchalantly. Mizuki's brows knitted together as he turned from Genma back towards Naruto, casting a sneer that seemed to be directed solely at him, before putting his signature smirk back on. That mask of yours is quite the statement, kid. Just curious, are you trying to keep your face a secret, or are you protecting us from something? Anko leaned in closer, her playful smirk widening. Oh, I was just thinking the same thing. What's going on over there? Are you a fanboy of that Kakashi-kun guy or something? Is he that well known in other villages? 'Cause that mask of yours is kinda similar to his, Genma added, his tone laced with mild amusement. Wait, you mean that one guy who used to be in our class? Anko replied, tilting her head, curious as she looked up at Genma, who nodded nonchalantly. You mean Kakashi the friend killer? Mizuki's words dripped with venom. Naruto felt every one of his veins go cold. He stared blankly at the group in front of him, slowly trying to process what they were saying. Hey, we don't know if that's true, Iruka interjected, a hint of worry tingling in his voice. We all saw it, Iruka. After he returned from that mission, Obito-kun was dead and Kakashi-kun had his eye, Mizuki continued, relishing the opportunity to provoke. I bet he got him killed on purpose just so he could take it for his own. Mizuki, you can't just, Iruka tried to reason, but Mizuki's words snapped Naruto out of his coma, now finding it hard to not say anything at all. You don't know what you're talking about. Naruto's voice cut through the air, rising with fierce defiance before Iruka could finish. Kakashi would never hurt someone intentionally like that, especially his teammate. Do you really think you know him that well, Menma? Defending someone so blindly even though you're not even from here, it's quite brave for someone so young. Maybe you're just a little fanboy after all. It's cute, Mizuki said, his tone almost syrupy sweet. Cut it out, Mizuki, Iruka's voice was firm, though Naruto could see the flicker of concern in his eyes. Anko chimed in, crossing her arms, her tone still lighthearted. Well, it sounds like this little fanboy has a lot of fire. But hey, that's what makes a ninja, right? Passion? She winked at Naruto, though did little to calm his rage, he appropriated nonetheless. Passion is great, but don't let it cloud your judgment, kid, Genma added, shifting his position. Kakashi-kun has his own demons. Everyone does, he said before shrugging. What do you know about it? Naruto shot back, his voice heaved in frustration. You just sit around with that stupid senbon in your mouth and make dumb comments. You wouldn't understand what it's really like to look up to someone. Once the words slipped from his lips, he realized that it probably wasn't fair to take his frustration out on Genma, but he couldn't help it. The things everyone was saying about Kakashi just making him so angry. Easy there, Menma, Iruka cautioned, moving closer to the blonde with his hands up a little, seeming to try to diffuse the tension. Don't let them get to you. They're just what? Mizuki interrupted sharply, his voice mocking yet tinged with a more aggressive note. Trying to look out for a kid who thinks a mask will get him noticed by someone like Kakashi-kun? He said his name with such disdain, as if all Kakashi was just an annoying problem somebody needed to fix. All of a sudden it was like all Naruto's anger reached its boiling point. "Stop calling me a kid," he shouted, his voice steady against the waves of contempt as he shut his eyes closed tightly with his fists clenched at his sides. "Kakashi's the best. You don't even know him like I do." Before anyone could say anything, a shout came from behind. "There you are, Unimo." Naruto turned to see the ANBU from earlier approaching, looking a bit disheveled, as if he had just rushed in from a long distance. Leaves were caught in his hair, and he was breathing heavily. But if Hound is here, does that mean? Relief washed over him when he noticed that Kakashi wasn't with him. Good, Naruto can do without Kakashi getting a big head after all the nice things he said about him. Everyone was silent as Hound stepped closer to the group, all the tension from earlier turning into something heavier. "Hound," Iruka said, his voice a curious mix of seriousness and something else that was hard to pin down. Now that the topic of Kakashi was gone, so was some of Naruto's anger, and he distantly found himself admiring how Iruka could remain calm even when he was clearly frustrated. Naruto wished he could keep his feelings in check like that, without them exploding out of control. Hound bristled at Iruka's tone, stepping forward, seeming to use his one-height advantage on Iruka to cast a long, intimidating shadow. "Keep these up, and I'll tell the Hokage about your little pranks," he warned, and the blonde felt his eyes widen at the brass of the threat. Iruka scoffed, an almost devilish smirk dancing on his lips. He leaned in closer to the ANBU, so close Naruto thought their noses would probably be nearly touching if it weren't for Hound's mask. "Oh, really? Go on, tell him. That doesn't scare me." "Fine." Hound spoke as he titled his head a bit, sounding almost scarily confident. "I guess you wouldn't mind me telling Asuma-san as well then?" His voice was low and serious, but the blonde could practically feel the smirk he probably had on. Naruto couldn't quite understand why this was so intense, but he could feel something stirring between them as Iruka stiffened at his words. His own smirk faltered for a brief moment and he squinted at Hound daringly. "You wouldn't dare," he said, pronouncing each word with slow intensity. Hound leaned even closer, the forehead of his mask touching Iruka's. "Try me," he hissed, his voice dripping with defiance, and Naruto felt the air get denser, and it became harder to remember to breathe. But to his surprise, Iruka's whole face slowly started to turn a bright red, almost resembling a ripe tomato. Naruto's never seen Iruka's face so bright. Was he that angry at Hound? Iruka, seeming to also feel his face rise in temperature, reeled back with an angry yell, a mix of irritation and mortification painting his face as he pulled his fist back, like he was about to punch the ANBU. But before he could act, Anko flung an arm around Iruka's shoulders, pushing him back with a wild laugh. "Whoa there, big guy. We're so sorry about our friend, ANBU-san. He has a bit of a temper." She giggled nervously, forcing Iruka and herself to bow deeply. Genma casually strolled over to Iruka's side, giving Hound a hearty nod. He helped Anko yank Iruka away, who was still yelling at Hound like a fireball. Naruto rolled his eyes, kinda sad to see Iruka go. He glanced back to see Mizuki still hanging back, waking up from behind Hound to whisper something Naruto couldn't hear to him with an insidious look. Hound became even more rigid than he already was, if that was even possible. Mizuki, with that infuriating grin, playfully knocked the ANBU's shoulder with his own, before strutting away like he owned the place. Naruto and Hound stood left on an empty street. Only the streetlights and moon to cast a faint glow over the darkened road. "What a jerk," Naruto muttered under his breath. Hound stands there for a moment before turning to look at Naruto. "Menma, right?" Naruto nodded stiffly, not really knowing what to do as Hound stared at him for a long while before looking away from him. You shouldn't look up to someone like him. At first Naruto had no clue what he was talking about, before he realized he probably heard the conversation from earlier. Then all the anger he was feeling before hit him in the face like a brick wall. "Who are you to say who I should or shouldn't like? I don't even know you." Naruto crossed his arms. It was getting really annoying that these people think that they get to dictate how he should feel, and I don't care if all that stuff is true anyways. Things happen and people die. I'm sure that it's not Kakashi's fault his teammate died. And I know that losing a friend feels like you're losing a part of yourself. Sasuke flashed in Naruto's mind. When he had left Konoha, Naruto felt like he didn't just lose a teammate but something bigger than that. Something he knew he couldn't afford to let go. He felt his eyebrows furrow as the memory. He's not just a strong person, he's human, and people just forget to see that. They all think he's a monster and scary, but I know he is a person who has a mind and feelings. People choose to see what they want to see. But I won't. I care about him, and I don't care if I'm the only one that does. Naruto said, glaring up at Hound from where he was looking at the ground, seeing him stiffen. They stayed like that for a moment, unmoving, before Naruto felt himself sigh and look back at the gravel beneath his shoes. He felt the night wind caress his hair softly, taking that instant to just hear the things around him and not his brain. Naruto heard Hound's feet move a bit beneath the gravel. Then I guess you don't really know him at all. Hound spoke low, his voice laced with a dismissive tone. With a surge of anger rising within him again, Naruto's head snapping up, ready to unleash a yell at the departing figure of Hound. But when he looked up, Hound was gone, leaving behind a different presence entirely. To Naruto's horror, Kakashi stood before him, still disguised, as the moonlight caught his wide expressive eyes locked on the blonde's face. Naruto? Kakashi's voice carried a weight that made the air thick around them, soft yet filled with an emotional gravity. Suddenly embarrassed, he felt the heat rise in his face as he caught himself frozen in the moment, a whirlwind of emotions engulfing him. Time seemed to stand still. All he could feel was a heavy dread coiling in his stomach. Great. Just what he needed. Kakashi would surely walk away with a swollen ego, and it would all be Naruto's fault. He'll never let him hear the end of it. Naruto opened his mouth, determined to speak, yet only finding him unable to. In truth, he didn't want to deny Kakashi's humanity. He knew he was more than just a ninja. However, the thought of revealing all those mushy feelings made him hesitate. Did you really mean all that? Kakashi's voice slipped out through the silence, weak but with soft, undeniable haste. Naruto had always thought that seeing Kakashi's face would be invigorating, something cool to brag about. Instead, it was turning into an absolute struggle. Kakashi gave birth to always being a master at concealing his true feelings behind that mask, yet with it out of the way, Naruto could see every flicker of emotion that spilled through the cracks. It felt so wrong. It's not. I just don't like it when people look down on you, Kakashi-sensei. It's unfair to you. Or anyone, really. But that doesn't mean I don't think you're a pain in the butt, because, honestly, you totally are. His rambling came to a sudden halt, eyes wide as he noticed something unusual about Kakashi. Are you crying? Kakashi stiffened, his gaze darting away in a flash, a momentary veil of vulnerability passing between them. Ma, don't be ridiculous, Naruto. These eye contacts just dry out my eyes sometimes. He rubbed his face hastily, and before Naruto could process what had just happened, Kakashi returned to his usual composed self, masking the moment with effortless ease. We should probably head back to the house. Naruto tilted his head, puzzled. You mean the abandoned house we just left? Yes, Naruto. Let's go before it gets any darker. Kakashi turned, striding down the path with a certainty that betrayed no hint of the emotions that had flickered moments before. Naruto fell into step beside him, a tempest of thoughts swirling within him as they began to walk together. Darkness wrapped around them like a heavy blanket, with the only source of light being the moon and street lights, making it hard for Naruto to see even a few feet ahead. Kakashi, however, moved with ease through the night, unbothered by the shadows that hid their surroundings. The quiet of the evening was filled with the soft chirping of crickets, and a gentle breeze brushed past Naruto, sending a faint shiver down his spine. So, what are you going to do now? Naruto asked, trying to break the silence hanging between them. Kakashi kept his gaze on the path in front of him. Silence stretched long between them before he finally spoke. There's not much we can do right now, Naruto. I'll watch out for that enemy Nen. But the best move is to stay quiet and avoid drawing any more unnecessary attention to ourselves. Naruto frowned at Kakashi's reply. Waiting wasn't something he handled well with. His patience was thin and worn. He definitely couldn't stay away from Iruka for long, not after those long 2 weeks he already had without him. Being trapped alone in his empty apartment made him realize just how much he appreciated Iruka's presence in his life. Even if they fought, he didn't care. The thought of rushing to Iruka's side to apologize, to fix what he had broken, grew stronger inside him. He longed to see Iruka smile at him again, to repair the gap growing between them with understanding and trust. "Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto's voice sounded unusually calm, glancing at Kakashi who was a few steps in front of him. His sensei responded with a soft hum, indicating he was listening. "How did you know about this house? Did you used to live there? Why is it abandoned?" Those questions had been swirling in Naruto's mind since they began their walk. Kakashi didn't answer for a while. He continued walking as if he hadn't heard Naruto at all, slowly starting to irritate the blonde. Kakashi never shared anything with Naruto. He had to say all those sappy feelings about Kakashi just for him to hear it all, so he thought it was only fair that Kakashi would at least try to talk to him like a normal person. Exhaustion took over Naruto's body, making him feel uncharacteristically tired, but most sick. Sick of being seen as weak, of people thinking he couldn't handle things, just because he was still technically a kid. But Naruto had stopped being a kid the day Iruka-sensei had taken a shuriken meant for him, the day the world had shown him, in brutal clarity, the price of protection. It was a confusing, twisted kind of logic. Nobody had seemed to care he was a kid when they'd kicked him out of the orphanage at 6. Forcing him into his own lonely apartment because the other children and adults felt unsafe around him. No one had cared he was a child when they'd hit him, pushed him, slapped him just for trying to buy food, for simply existing in their space. So why did they suddenly care now? Now that Naruto had learned, in the harshest possible ways, that he wasn't like the others, that he wasn't meant for warmth, or love, or care. He flinched when he felt a familiar hand land on his shoulder. He hadn't even realized he had stopped walking. "Naruto, are you? Why won't you tell me?" He shoved Kakashi's hand off him, finally glared up at the man from above the ground. "You never tell me anything. I'm always the one left in the dark. You and Sakura knew about the curse on Sasuke, but you didn't tell me." Air grew scarce in his lungs, a tight band squeezing his chest. His vision swam, the world tilting precariously as old, familiar fear clawed its way up his throat. He started shaking, the ground feeling unstable beneath his feet. You hide everything," he gasped, his voice thin and reedy, like he was 6 years old again. "You won't even tell me how you know about that house. Why?" Naruto felt something warm track down his cheek. He reached up, his fingers touching wetness beneath his eye. He was crying. In front of him, he heard the soft, weary sound come out of Kakashi, followed by a silence that stretched, heavy and unresponsive. It seemed, just as always, Kakashi truly wasn't going to explain anything. "I used to live there," Kakashi finally said, the words quiet, almost lost in the air. Naruto's head snapped up, eyes wide with shock. Why didn't you just say that from the beginning, then?" Naruto's voice was barely a whisper, thick with confusion and the remnants of tears. Kakashi looked away, his gaze drifting towards something far beyond Naruto, distant and haunted. I don't see this place as a home, Naruto," he said, his voice flat and empty. "Not anymore." He paused, a profound shadow passing over his face, extinguishing the usual light in his eyes. Something bad happened here when I was a kid. Something that made me leave and never want to look back." He sighed again, a heavy, broken sound. "This place just holds bad memories. I never saw the point in talking about it, not until now." "So, where did you live, then?" Naruto asked quietly. He wasn't entirely sure how to navigate this sudden openness from Kakashi, how to respond without pushing too hard, but the question felt necessary. By this time, "Well, I'd already left this place," Kakashi answered, shoving his hands into his pockets. "I lived in a small apartment, on the other side of the village." He shifted his weight, and something about his stance, the way he held himself, made Naruto pause. He seemed uneasy, almost exposed, like maybe this conversation was pulling him too far out of his usual shell, or maybe Naruto had been pushing too hard. Naruto simply nodded slowly, letting the quiet hang between them, careful not to break the fragile moment or make things more awkward than they already felt. Just as the silence threatened to stretch too long, Kakashi clapped a hand onto Naruto's back, a sudden, firm pat that made him stumble forward a step. All right. Enough with the interrogation," Kakashi said, the sudden shift in tone jarring but familiar. "Ma, we should get going." Honestly, I've been dying to take these contacts out since the moment I put them in. They always irritate my Sharingan. He even managed a slight pout, rubbing at his left eye, and Naruto couldn't help the small smile that tugged at his lips. Yeah, okay, Kakashi-sensei. Naruto chuckled softly, shaking his head, and started to fall into step behind his sensei, turning towards the direction of the house. If Naruto hated one thing about Kakashi's house, it was the unsettling silence. He found himself absurdly wishing for pervy Sage's presence nearby, just so he could hear the old man's booming, gravelly snores echoing through the walls. Anything to break this oppressive stillness, to feel like he wasn't completely alone. But there was no familiar, annoying snore, no shuffling footsteps, no distant voice. The only sound was the slow, clicky whir of the ceiling fan turning above the futon he lay on, a lonely, rhythmic whisper that seemed only to emphasize the vast, empty silence, making the quiet feel heavier, more profound. Kakashi had said he could sleep in his old room, the one they'd apparently raided for disguises earlier, while he'd sleep elsewhere, probably a guest room or something. Naruto hadn't really been paying attention to Kakashi's instructions. In the oppressive quiet, his thoughts drifted, perhaps predictably, to Iruka. What was he doing right now? Was Iruka worried about him back in their own time? Probably not. They hadn't seen each other in weeks. Iruka likely hadn't even noticed he was gone. Naruto shifted uncomfortably to the side on his futon, pulling the covers more tightly around himself. Iruka had always told him that Naruto reminded him of his own childhood, and the blonde had always thought he was just saying that to make Naruto feel less lonely. But the more he came to understand Iruka, the more he suspected Iruka wasn't far off the mark after all. Iruka had the same deep-seated dislike for Hound that Naruto felt towards Sasuke. This Iruka didn't seem to hate him yet either. Maybe, with them being closer in age this time, Naruto could actually prove to this version of Iruka that he was strong enough to protect him too. He hated how much he missed Iruka. He hated how Iruka had made him feel like everything would somehow be alright, that things would work out. Naruto hated the memory of sharing ramen with him, of being allowed to just ramble about his day. What nibbled at him most was the uncomfortable truth. He didn't truly hate any of it. It had felt good not to be alone anymore, to have someone who seemed to understand, who would actually listen without telling him even when he was being too loud or overdramatic. It was weird though, Naruto for his whole life was the punchline, the kid who had to pull crazy stunts just to get anyone to look at him. Now, here, Iruka was doing the same things he used to do. Iruka had been right, they were startlingly similar. But strangely enough, Iruka wasn't the only one. He remembered how Mizuki and the others had talked about Kakashi, like he was some kind of soulless beast, someone who couldn't be trusted. Naruto wondered if Kakashi got the same glares he did from strangers, the kind that said he was a disgrace to the entire village just by continuing to exist. He wondered if Iruka ever got tired of people older than him never taking him seriously because he sometimes did stupid things. If it was harder for him to get respect from people that gave respect to others. He wondered if that was why he looked up to them so much. Why being seen as an equal by them felt more important now than anything. It was embarrassingly childish, but Naruto wondered maybe this was what kids meant when they said they admired their parents. That they wanted their parents to be proud of them. If his own parents had been alive, would he have felt this way about them? Or if they didn't trust him to handle his own? Naruto squeezed his eyes shut and buried himself deeper under the futon, finally letting sleep claim him. Alone in the quiet, echoing space of his apartment, Naruto sometimes found his dreams drifting, not to the roar of the crowd or the thrill of a mission, but to the achingly simple reality of his parents being alive. Just there. They were strangers, ghosts he'd never met. Their faces were blank canvases, their voices silent echoes, swallowed whole by the monstrous tragedy that had ripped them from him years ago. All he had were the sparse, fragile whispers from Gigi. They died protecting the village from the Kyuubi, just like Iruka's parents. But unlike him, Iruka had memories, painful, yes, but precious memories nonetheless. Naruto had nothing, no warmth of a hand, no echo of a laugh, no single, fleeting image. Just a vast, gaping void, a hollow ache deep in his chest where they were supposed to be. It felt bizarre, twisted even, to grieve for people he'd never known, never held. Yet the grief, sharp and persistent, clawed at him all the same. Still, sometimes, a strange sensation would pierce that suffocating emptiness. A phantom warmth, like the faintest whisper of a long-forgotten scent, the impossible, comforting aroma of a kitchen on a quiet morning. He'd cling to it, picturing a breakfast he would never eat, prepared by hands he would never feel. He'd conjure them, these fragile fantasies. His mother, maybe, with a gentle but firm hand, insisting he eat his natto. His own childish, imagined protests, met with a soft, knowing smile. Small, achingly mundane moments that weren't memories at all, but cruel glimpses of the ordinary family life he saw everyone else living, a life forever, irrevocably, beyond his reach. Then the dreams would fade, leaving only the familiar silence of his apartment, where the waiting meal was just another lukewarm cup of ramen, indistinguishable from yesterday's or the day before. So, when a strange smell pulled him from sleep, Naruto's first thought was that this, too, must be a dream. It was the scent of cooked rice and something salty, something utterly alien to his usual solitary mornings, and it woke him in a way nothing else ever had. He wasn't in his apartment, he was still in Kakashi's old bedroom. Naruto was slow to rise, his mind insisting this was some elaborate trick of sleep. But as he slid open the shoji door, the smell intensified, growing richer, warmer. It jolted his senses awake, sharp and focused, like a predator catching a distant scent on the wind. Driven by the aroma, he crept through the empty hall, following the irresistible trail of food. He reached the corner leading to the kitchen, stopping just short. Heart pounding with a mixture of disbelief and hesitant hope, he slowly and cautiously peeked around the frame. Kakashi stood in the kitchen, a picture so profoundly wrong it made Naruto freeze in the doorway. The legendary copy nin, Kakashi Hitaki, the fearsome Junin known for his skill, was wearing an apron. And he was cooking. It was a bizarre, head-spinning sight. Naruto hesitated, half hidden by the doorframe, the sheer unexpectedness of his sensei in this domestic setting locking his feet to the floor. Kakashi wore a simple, slightly askew gray apron over his familiar dark attire. His face, unmasked, was turned towards a pot on the stove, focused intently as he stirred something within. Without his usual mission gear, he looked almost peaceful. Not like the scary copy Enin at all, but just a sleepy man, making breakfast on a quiet morning. The air in the kitchen wasn't the sterile silence of Naruto's empty apartment. It hummed with quiet, unfamiliar sounds, the gentle sizzle, the soft, rhythmic clink of a spoon against ceramic, the low murmur of something bubbling. It smelled warm, alive, utterly domestic. It felt like stepping into one of those impossible, wistful dreams he sometimes had, the kind where someone else was making breakfast, filling a space with warmth and care. "Naruto, I know you're awake," Kakashi said, his voice soft but steady. He glanced towards the blonde, continuing to stir a bowl with a ladle. "I made rice and miso soup." He must have sensed Naruto there, of course. He was Kakashi-sensei. Naruto flinched as he was caught red-handed doing nothing but looking. There was a hesitant hope within him, the fragile feeling of stepping into that warm space, but crumbled into a familiar wave of awkwardness. A warmth crawled up his stomach. He wasn't sure why he felt like he'd been caught doing something wrong, but just by witnessing this scene had to be a crime on its own. But the smell, the wonderful, savory smell was still there, pulling at him. It felt almost unreal, a scent of home he barely knew. Slowly, tentatively, Naruto pushed past the doorframe, stepping fully into the warm, fragrant kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the window above the counter, illuminating dust motes dancing like tiny, golden spirits in the air. "I didn't know you knew how to cook, Kakashi-sensei." The words were meant to come out with his usual "why" manner, but instead, they came out small and meek, and laced with genuine surprise. "Ma, what's that supposed to mean?" Kakashi turned from the pot, holding the ladle loosely, a playful, slightly teasing smile touching the corners of his eyes. You know," Naruto stammered, trying desperately to inject some of his usual bravado into his voice, but the surprise and the utterly unfamiliar scent still held him captive. He shuffled further into the room, drawn forward by the irresistible promise the smell held. The scary copy nin. I figured you just ate all those raw vegetables you always tried to give me, or maybe. I dunno, instant ramen?" He gestured vaguely, feeling the unwelcomed embarrassment still creeping up his stomach. It wasn't the confident jab he'd imagined, sounding more like genuine, albeit clumsy, confusion. Kakashi chuckled softly, a low, warm sound that was just as unexpected as the apron. His eyes crinkled slightly at the corners, a hint of teasing in his gaze. I suppose you'd know a lot about that. Naruto rolled his eyes, a familiar pang of envy hitting him. Here Kakashi was, making a proper meal, while Naruto himself was usually stuck with the few things he knew how to make, which mostly involved boiling water. He wandered over to the pantry, pulling the door open as he asked, "Do you even have any instant ramen for me to make?" He rummaged through the pantry shelves, pushing aside unfamiliar boxes and jars, searching for the telltale bright packaging, but found a whole lot of nothing. Not a single package of ramen, which meant Naruto would have to go all the way to the store just to buy his own. Kakashi was lucky Naruto had remembered his froggy wallet. Kakashi-sensei, how do you not have any ramen?" Naruto turned around, letting his frustration show in a dramatic pout aimed at his sensei's apparent inconsideration. "Well, Naruto, I didn't think you'd need any right now, seeing as I was already making us breakfast." Kakashi scratched his cheek absent-mindedly, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. He turned back to the stove. "Ma," he continued, "I guess when I'm out later looking for any sign of that enemy nin's whereabouts, I could swing by the store and pick you up some ramen. But only if you promise to eat some vegetables with it." He held up a pointer finger, as if negotiating a vital mission detail, before turning back to plate the food into 2 bowls. "You made food? For me, too?" Naruto asked, his voice small again, his mind struggling to catch up. Kakashi gave him a confused look, then nodded slowly. A wave of pure, utter excitement washed over Naruto, hitting him like a tidal wave. He didn't even think, he just moved, launching himself at Kakashi and wrapping his arms tightly around his sensei's middle. He bounced on the tip of his toes, shouting, "Thanks Kakashi-sensei. You're the best." A home-cooked meal, made just for him. Naruto could probably count on one hand how many times he'd had one that wasn't burnt or suspiciously lumpy. It was a rare moment, a precious gift he already cherished above all others. "Ma, do you really only eat instant ramen?" Kakashi hesitantly asked as he watched Naruto practically snatch one of the bowls and quickly settle himself at the small kitchen table, his eyes already glued to the steam rising from the food. Naruto shrugged, already eyeing the contents of the bowl with hungry anticipation. Yeah, most of the time, anyway. It's easy to make. When I was in the academy, though, Iruka-sensei was always trying to improve his cooking, so he'd make me try his food, but it was always gross and usually burnt. And he'd always try to hide vegetables in it like a weirdo," he added with a shudder. Kakashi, who had also grabbed his bowl and sat down next to Naruto, hummed in response, a soft, understanding sound. Iruka had always been a bit of a klutz in the kitchen. "Yummy. This is so good, Kakashi-sensei," Naruto exclaimed, already shoveling a huge mouthful of rice and something savory into his mouth. He swallowed quickly, eyes wide with genuine appreciation. "Seriously, it's way better than, well, anything I make. Or Iruka-sensei's experiments." Kakashi chuckled again, the sound warm and gentle. His eyes held a hint of a smile. "Glad you approve. A growing ninja needs to eat properly, you know." He took a slow, deliberate sip of his miso soup. "Though I suppose just surviving on ramen has given you a certain resilience." Naruto grinned, momentarily forgetting his earlier embarrassment. "Hey, ramen is the best. And it's fast. When you're the future Hokage, you don't have time for fancy cooking." He paused, taking a huge bite of rice, savoring the flavor. "But this is definitely worth the time." He scarfed down the rest of his breakfast in record time, practically inhaling the delicious rice and tofu as if it were air. Setting the both empty bowls down with a clatter, he looked up at Kakashi, buzzing with energy from the unexpected, wonderful meal. "So, Kakashi-sensei, what are we doing today?" Kakashi finished his own bowl more sedately, setting it beside Naruto's. "I already told you, Naruto, I was planning on heading out alone this morning. I need to look for any sign of that enemy nin's whereabouts." "But what if he's not here? Like he didn't travel back in time with us?" Naruto asked, tilting his head. "I doubt that's the case. If my memory's correct, the turtle he was holding is the reason we got into this mess in the first place. And he was well within the range of the light that hit us before we time traveled. I think he's here, he's just hiding." Naruto's brow furrowed in confusion. But if he is here, why not just go after the baby version of me? From what I remember, Kakashi explained patiently, there are at least 2 ANBU watching you wherever you go, even as a baby. The Sandame was very keen on keeping you safe. Naruto's eyebrows pushed together, forming a pout. So you mean that guys like Hound were watching me? The thought made him uncomfortable. Not a fan of Hound? Kakashi said playfully, a teasing glint in his eyes. Naruto shook his head emphatically. It's not that I hate him, but he was being mean to Iruka-sensei and Iruka-sensei doesn't seem to like him at all. And he doesn't have good opinions about you either. He's a big jerk. Kakashi chuckled softly again, the sound warm and appreciative. He can be a bit opinionated, Kakashi allowed, his eyes crinkling further. But he's dedicated, and he was just doing his job. Naruto still looked unconvinced. Yeah, well, his job seemed to involve being annoying. And why would he be mean about you? Did you know him or something? Ma, it's complicated, but him being mean is perhaps that he just has a different perspective of things, Kakashi said smoothly, taking another slow sip of his soup. He set the bowl down. Anyway, thinking about ANBU watching you as a baby, it makes sense why the enemy Nin wouldn't target you directly. Too much protection. So, what, he's just hiding somewhere? Waiting? Naruto asked, leaning forward slightly, the earlier domestic warmth now mixed with the familiar tension of a mission. Likely, Kakashi confirmed, nodding. I'm sure he's planning an attack, that's why I need to find him before he can follow through. He stood up, gathering the empty bowls to the sink to begin rinsing them. Naruto watched him, tapping his fingers on the table. Okay, so you're going out to look for him. What should I do? Kakashi turned back from the sink, drying his hands on a towel. I considered having you come with me, but given the circumstances and the fact that we're in the past, it might be safer if you stay put for now. Stay put? But I'm a shinobi too. I can help. Naruto protested, jumping up from his seat. I know you can, Naruto, Kakashi said gently, walking back towards the blonde and carefully setting down a second bowl of food in front of him. He placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. But you're also, well, you're you. Your presence here, at this time, is a significant anomaly. Drawing attention to yourself while I'm trying to move discreetly could complicate things. Especially if the enemy Nin recognizes you. Then what am I supposed to do? Stay put in this dingy, abandoned house? I'll go crazy. Naruto threw his hands up in exasperation. Kakashi sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. I know that even if I tell you to stay here, you'll find a way out. So, I'm trusting you, Naruto, to stay in the village while I'm gone. And make sure you're with someone like Iruka, or even Hound at all times. Well, hanging out with Iruka-sensei wouldn't be so bad, Naruto admitted, considering it. He still needs to teach all the cool stuff he can do with seals. But, Hound? I think I'll pass. Naruto crossed his arms again, glowering at the mere thought. A faint smirk touched Kakashi's lips. If Iruka is with you, Naruto, Hound won't be far behind. The two of them tend to stick together. Naruto wrinkled his nose, genuinely confused. Seriously? They just follow each other around? That's weird. Kakashi shrugged lightly, the gesture casual. They're close? He let the implication hang in the air for just a second before bringing the conversation back to the point. Anyway, he continued, his tone firming, my point is, staying with either of them will keep you safe and out of trouble while I'm gone. I'll be back before dark. But what if the enemy Nin finds you? Naruto countered, frowning. You should take me. I'm strong. I can help you fight him. Naruto, Kakashi's voice was gentle but firm. Your strength is not the issue here. It's your presence. We don't know what this enemy Nin knows, or what his goals are beyond getting the turtle. He knows who you are in the future, you're his target, remember? It's a risk we can't take right now. He paused, his eyes softening slightly. Besides, I need to be able to move quickly and quietly. You tend to attract attention. Naruto pouted, crossing his arms stubbornly. Hey, I can be quiet when I want to be. Ma, perhaps, Kakashi conceded with a hint of amusement. But your definition of quiet might differ slightly from mine. Look, Naruto, this isn't about whether you're strong enough. It's about strategy and minimizing risk. Your mission is to stay low, stay safe, and stay with someone reliable. Can you do that? Naruto kicked at an imaginary pebble on the floor, still looking disgruntled. He hated being told to just wait around. But Kakashi did have a point about drawing attention. And the idea of spending time with Iruka again, even this younger version who didn't know him, was appealing. Maybe he could even try to subtly help Iruka with his cooking experiments. Fine, Naruto grumbled, though some of the fight had left him. I'll try to find Iruka-sensei. But what if he doesn't want to hang out with me? He doesn't even know me. He seemed to take a liking to you yesterday, Kakashi said, a slight smile returning to his face. And Iruka has a good heart. Just be yourself, Naruto. But maybe slightly less boisterous than usual? He raised an eyebrow playfully. Naruto scowled. Hey, I don't know what that means, but it sounds like an insult. Ma, Kakashi muttered quietly. Just be mindful of the time and place, alright? And stay out of trouble. Seriously, Naruto. No major pranks, no challenging random jonin, no revealing anything about the future. Yeah, I know, Naruto muttered. It was a lot of rules, but he understood the importance. Mostly. Good. Kakashi gave his shoulder a final squeeze before stepping away. I'll leave now. You should eat the rest of your breakfast and then head out to the village. Just stay within the village, please. Naruto rolled his eyes internally as he spoke. Alright, Kakashi-sensei. And Naruto, Kakashi added, pausing at the doorway. Naruto looked up. Thank you. For yesterday. And for this morning. His eyes held a genuine warmth that piles Naruto's stomach with a feeling of strange security. Yeah, no problem. Kakashi-sensei, Naruto mumbled, feeling suddenly awkward again. Kakashi nodded, a knowing smile playing on his lips, and then, with a silent grace that only a seasoned ninja possessed, he was gone. Naruto watched the empty doorway for a moment, the warmth of the kitchen and the lingering scent of breakfast feeling strangely comforting. He looked down at the second bowl of food Kakashi had plated for him, still sitting on the table. He had been so excited about the first one that he hadn't even noticed there was more. He sat back down, picking up the second bowl. It was still warm, a home-cooked meal, just for him, twice. It felt nice, really nice. Operation Find Iruka-sensei and maybe eat more ramen was officially a go. And maybe, just maybe, he could figure out how to keep this version of Iruka safe, and show him that he wasn't just a kid who pulled stupid pranks, but someone capable of protecting the people he cared about. Maybe he could even try to understand why Iruka and Hound were so weirdly connected. The morning birds chirped as Naruto made his way through the streets of Konoha. He was actually getting a better look at what was changed within it, and how there were yet to be buildings he recognized that had not been built yet. Or the fact that he would sometimes pass a vague, familiar face, but the person would be much younger. It was kinda unsettling, if Naruto was being honest. He wandered aimlessly for a bit, trying to spot anyone who looked like a younger Iruka. Maybe he'd be near the academy? Or possibly the training ground? He wasn't entirely sure how to go about this. It felt weird, actively searching for someone he knew but didn't know yet. As he rounded a corner near the academy, a familiar voice cut through the morning air. Menma, is that you? Naruto's head snapped up. Standing a few feet away, looking slightly surprised, was Iruka. He was holding a scroll and seemed to be heading towards the academy building. A wide grin split Naruto's face. Iruka-sensei, he blurted out, relieved to see him. Iruka's expression softened, a small smile touching his lips. He rubbed at the scar on his nose, a gesture Naruto knew so well. Hey, what are you doing wandering around by yourself? Where's, He trailed off, clearly unsure what to call Kakashi's Sukeya persona. Oh, Sukeya-sensei went off to do some stuff, Naruto replied vaguely, waving a hand. Anyways, I was hoping I could find you. He felt a warmth spread through him as he admitted it. Iruka's cheeks seemed to color slightly, and he looked away for a moment before meeting Naruto's gaze again. Oh, well, yeah, I was just heading to the academy, but... He paused, tapping the scroll against his leg. You mentioned yesterday you wanted to learn about seals, right? Since I'm not really busy right now, I could show you some basic stuff. The library has some good books. Naruto's eyes lit up. This was perfect. Really? You do that? Awesome. He practically vibrated with excitement. This was exactly what he wanted. A chance to spend time with Iruka, learn something cool, and prove he wasn't just a kid who needed looking after. Yeah, really. Iruka chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. Come on, the library isn't far. We can find a quiet spot. Following Iruka, Naruto tried to contain his eagerness, though it was a losing battle. He glanced around the village again, noticing more differences. The Hokage mountain was still under construction, only the first 3 faces carved into the stone. People moved with a different energy, a sense of rebuilding and cautious optimism that felt strange compared to the Konoha he knew, which was usually bustling or sometimes tense with current threats. They reached the library, a building Naruto usually only visited when forced to by pervy sage for research. Inside, it was quiet, the air smelling of old paper and dust. Iruka led him to a section filled with scrolls and thick books. Okay, so Fuinjutsu is pretty complex, Iruka explained, pulling a few volumes from a shelf. But the basic idea is to use special characters or seals to contain or manipulate chakra or objects. What I used yesterday was just a simple concealment seal. He set the books down at a table, opening one to a page filled with intricate lines and symbols. Naruto leaned in, trying to make sense of it. See, these are the basic characters, Iruka pointed with a finger. You have to draw them precisely, and then channel your chakra into them to activate the seal. It takes practice. A lot of practice. Naruto stared at the page, his brow furrowed. The symbols looked confusing, nothing like the simple doodles he sometimes made. Wow, that looks hard, he admitted, a little deflated. He was good at learning things by doing, not by reading and drawing complicated lines. Iruka ruffled his hair gently. It is, but it's also really useful. You can seal things away, like weapons or supplies, or even use them for traps or communication. The concealment seal, for example, uses these characters. He pointed to a specific cluster. You channel your chakra, and it creates a temporary field that makes you invisible. Naruto perked up at that. Invisible? That part was cool. So, to do that smoke thing yesterday, you just drew that on the ground? Exactly. Iruka smiled. It's another type of seal, a flash bomb seal. Useful for making a quick getaway. He flipped to another page showing a different set of symbols. You place the seal, channel chakra, and when triggered, in this case, by stepping on it, it releases a burst of smoke and a loud bang. Naruto traced the new symbols with his finger, trying to commit them to memory. So if I learn this, I could make traps? Or hide things? Well, that's a way you can do it. I did had a spar scroll with me though, Iruka confirmed. Anyway, you could pretty much seal away anything so no one else could get to it, he added with a playful wink. Naruto grinned. That was definitely a useful skill. He imagined sealing away his precious instant ramen from sneaky villagers. Okay, teach me how to draw that one. The flash bomb one. Iruka chuckled, pulling a spare scroll and brush from his bag. Alright, let's start with the basics of drawing the characters first. Precision is key, Menma. Naruto dipped the brush into the dark ink, the slick liquid clinging to the bristles. He held his breath, trying desperately to replicate the intricate lines Iruka had carefully demonstrated moments before. His hand felt alien, clumsy and unwilling, the brush strokes wavering and uneven like a shaky heartbeat. He grit his teeth, determined, and tried again, pouring all his focus into the task, but the symbols that appeared on the scroll were still wrong. A messy, imprecise tangle of ink that bore little resemblance to the clean, sharp characters Iruka had drawn. A frustrated groan escaped his lips. This is impossible. He threw the brush down with a clatter, the sound echoing slightly in the quiet library corner. A few drops of ink splattered onto the white scroll, marring his already terrible attempt. It's just lines and squiggles. How am I supposed to make them do anything? Iruka reached over calmly, his movements slow and gentle as he took the splattered scroll and the discarded brush. He looked down at Naruto's messy work, a small, understanding smile softening his features. Hey, it's okay, Menma, he said soothingly. Sealing jutsu isn't easy. It takes a lot of patience. And a lot of practice. He dipped the brush back into the ink pot and, with practiced ease, fluently drew the characters again on a clean section of the scroll, the lines appearing clean and sharp this time. See? It's not just about drawing the shape. It's about control. He handed the brush back to Naruto. Don't worry, he encouraged gently. You'll get the hang of it. My mom was actually the one who taught me the basics of this, and honestly, I was terrible at first. It took me ages to even draw a single character correctly. Naruto blinked, the comment pulling him abruptly out of his frustration. Iruka mentioning his mom was unexpected, unusual. In the future he knew, the Iruka who taught at the academy rarely, if ever, spoke about his parents. It was a subject Naruto had quickly learned was off limits, a wound too painful to touch. To hear him talk about her so casually now, in this time, felt jarring, like a piece of the world had shifted subtly. Your mom? Naruto asked, the words coming out with a strange mix of curiosity and hesitant uncertainty. He didn't want to pry, but the chance to learn about the people who had raised the man who would become so important to him was too compelling to ignore. Is she a ninja too? Iruka's smile faded slightly, the warmth in his eyes dimming. It was replaced by a quiet, familiar sadness, a look Naruto recognized instinctively. It was the same expression people wore when they spoke of loss, of absence. She was, Iruka said softly, his gaze drifting away from Naruto, past him towards the large library window, his thoughts seemingly miles away. Both of my parents were ninja. They passed away a couple of years ago. Protecting the village. A cold knot formed in Naruto's stomach, tightening painfully. Right, the Kyuubi attack. Iruka had lost his parents that night. He knew that, of course. It was a fact everyone in the village knew, a shared trauma, and it was part of why Iruka understood Naruto's own deep-seated loneliness so well. But hearing it from this younger Iruka, seeing the fresh, quiet grief reflected in his eyes in this moment, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. It wasn't just a historical note from the past, it felt like a present wound, still aching. Oh, Naruto mumbled, the single word feeling utterly inadequate to the weight of Iruka's quiet statement. He paused, unsure if he should push further, if it was okay to ask about something clearly so painful. But the curiosity, the overwhelming desire to know more about the people who had shaped the man who would eventually become his first true bond, was too strong to suppress. What were they like? He asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Iruka seemed to appreciate the question, a faint warmth returning to his gaze as he turned back to Naruto. My mom, she was really kind, he said, a soft, fond smile reappearing. She was patient, especially with things like sealing jutsu. She always said I'd get it eventually, even when I messed up constantly like you are now. He chuckled lightly, a wistful, faraway sound. My dad? Iruka's expression grew more complex as he spoke of his father, a mix of deep respect tinged with a lingering, almost childlike confusion. He was strict, really strict. Especially about me being a ninja. He hated that I was always pulling pranks instead of focusing on training. He'd always say I needed to take things seriously, that being a ninja was important, that it wasn't a game. Iruka looked down at the scroll again, his finger tracing one of the ceiling characters he had drawn. I never really understood why he was so hard on me back then. It just felt like he didn't approve of me sometimes. He paused again, his voice dropping slightly, the memory that followed clearly painful to recall. My mom, during the attack, there was a moment, she took a hit that was meant for me. Got badly hurt because of it. I didn't understand why she'd do something like that. Why would she risk her life, for me? Iruka looked up at Naruto then, his eyes holding a depth of understanding and quiet sorrow that seemed to go beyond his young years. But now I think I get it. Naruto stared at him, the pieces clicking into place in his mind. The image Iruka painted was vivid. The strict father wanting his son to be strong and capable, the gentle mother shielding her child from harm. It was a picture of parental love, of family, that Naruto could only imagine, filtered through Gigi's sparse, clinical stories about lineage and his own lonely, yearning dreams. But still, the core act, the sacrifice Iruka described, it was bewildering, confusing. But why? Naruto asked, the question escaping his lips before he could stop it, raw and genuine. Why would someone do that? Iruka looked at him, his expression gentle, almost pitying in its understanding. He gave a small, sad smile. Well, that's simple, Iruka said, his voice quiet but firm. The answer delivered with the quiet conviction of someone who had learned its truth through devastating, irreversible loss. He tapped the scroll with the ceiling characters he had drawn, the symbols now seeming to hold a different weight. It's a parent's job, to protect their child. He cleared his throat softly, the quiet moment lingering for just a beat longer before he turned his attention back to the table and the scattered scrolls. Anyway, he said, his voice resuming a lighter, more focused tone, tapping the scroll with the ceiling characters once more. Seals can be used for protection too, in their own way. Sealing away dangerous things, or creating barriers. He picked up the unused brush, dipping it carefully into the ink. But before we get to any of that, we really need to master drawing these basic characters. He looked back at Naruto, a small, encouraging smile returning. Precision is key. Ready to try again? Are you sure this will work, Iruka-sensei? Naruto hesitantly asked. I still don't think I wrote mine correctly. He held up the scroll, the inked characters still a bit wobbly and uneven, far from the crisp lines Iruka drew effortlessly. Iruka looked at Naruto and ruffled his hair. He really seemed to like doing that. It's okay, Menma. Accuracy comes with practice, but practicing how to summon them is just as important. Even if it doesn't work perfectly, you need to get the feel for channeling your chakra into the seal. He smiled, a genuine, encouraging expression that made Naruto feel a little less frustrated. We need an open space to practice activating them though, somewhere we won't accidentally blow up a library shelf. Naruto grinned, the idea of potentially blowing something up safely, of course instantly boosting his mood. Yeah, like a training ground? Exactly. Iruka agreed, rolling up the scrolls. There's a training ground just outside the village gates. It's usually pretty empty this time of day. We can head there. With their scrolls and brush packed away, they left the quiet confines of the library and made their way through the still rebuilding streets of Konoha. The midday sun cast long shadows as they approached the village gates. Naruto felt a familiar flicker of apprehension as they passed the new guards, remembering their earlier encounter. But Iruka strode confidently, and they exited the gates without incident. The training ground was a wide, open field bordered by trees, scattered with worn targets and training posts. It felt vast and a little wild compared to the village interior. Iruka led them to a relatively clear area. Okay, pick a spot, Iruka instructed, unrolling his own scroll. Remember, you need to channel your chakra into the character you've drawn. Start with a simple flash bomb seal. Just a small one. Naruto nodded, adrenaline starting to pump. He found a smooth patch of dirt and, using a small stick he found, he tried to replicate the flash bomb seal from memory. His lines were still clumsy, but he focused, trying to make them as precise as possible. Once he finished, he took a deep breath, knelt down, and placed his palm over the drawing. Closing his eyes, he concentrated, trying to push his chakra into the lines. He felt a faint warmth under his hand, a weak thrumming. He waited, holding his breath, expecting a puff of smoke, maybe a small bang. Instead, there was a tiny fizz sound, and a single, pathetic wisp of gray smoke curled up from the ground before dissipating instantly. Naruto opened his eyes, staring at the meager result. Disappointment flooded him. "Aw, man, that's all?" Iruka chuckled, walking over. "Hey, that's not bad for a first try. You felt the chakra connect, right? That's the important part. The precision of the drawing affects the power and reliability, but the chakra connection is key." He knelt beside Naruto, looking at the smudged drawing. "See, some of these lines are a little off, and your chakra control needs work, but you activated it. That's progress." Naruto felt a little better hearing that. Maybe it wasn't a total failure. He was about to try drawing another seal when a low, flat voice cut through the air. "Amino." Naruto and Iruka both looked up sharply. Standing at the edge of the training ground, just emerging from the trees, was the silver-haired ANBU with the dog mask. Hound. Hound stalked closer, his masked face giving away nothing, but the rigid set of his shoulders and the slight tilt of his head conveyed clear annoyance. "What are you doing here?" His voice, muffled slightly by the mask, was as devoid of warmth as Naruto remembered. Iruka stood up, rubbing the back of his neck defensively. "Oh, hey, Hound. Just practicing some jutsu. Needed an open space." Hound stopped a few feet away, his gaze sweeping over the training ground, then settling on Naruto. "This area is restricted, Amino. Especially right now." His masked eyes narrowed slightly. "And you brought that kid, too?" The low tone held a definite edge of disapproval. Naruto bristled at being called a kid, especially by Hound. He was a ninja, the future Hokage. He couldn't wait until he got stronger, so then people could finally start to respect him a little. "He's not just some kid," Iruka retorted quickly, stepping slightly in front of Naruto. "He's learning. He's my student for the day." "Your student," Hound repeated flatly, the phrase sounding like an accusation. In a restricted training ground. Practicing seals. He sighed, a soft, exasperated sound. Are you serious, Amino? Do you ever take anything seriously? Hey, it's not for a prank this time. Iruka protested, his cheeks flushing slightly under the ANBU's scrutiny. He actually wants to learn Fuinjutsu and I'm teaching him. We needed space to practice activating them. And you couldn't find any other space? Hound's masked face seemed to bore into Iruka. There are rules, Amino. Protocols. This area is off limits for a reason. I know the rules, Hound. Iruka shot back, crossing his arms defiantly. And I know we're not interfering with anything. We're just practicing some basic seals. Hound was silent for a moment, his masked head tilting as if assessing the situation. Naruto shuffled his feet, feeling the tension thick between them. He didn't like Hound, not just because he was mean to Iruka, but because there was something about him that felt familiar in an uncomfortable way. Just finish up quickly, Hound finally said, his tone still weary. And don't make a habit of this. Civilian access to these grounds requires explicit permission. He gave Naruto another pointed look before turning and jumping back into the trees as silently as he had appeared. Iruka let out a breath he seemed to have been holding. See? I told you he was annoying. He turned to Naruto, a wry smile on his face. Sorry about that. He's always like that when he's on duty. Naruto nodded, still watching the spot where Hound had disappeared. Yeah, he's a total jerk. Why's he always bothering you anyway? You guys don't seem to like each other much. Iruka rubbed his scar again, an unreadable expression on his face. It's complicated. We just rub each other the wrong way, I guess. He thinks I'm immature, and I feel like he's got a major stick up his. Iruka paused, catching himself. Anyways, back to the matter at hand. He knelt back down beside Naruto, trying to recapture the earlier enthusiasm. Ready to try that one again? Naruto was about to nod when a voice cut in again, closer this time. Your lines are crooked, kid. You'll never get a proper flash bomb with that kind of sloppy work. Hound stepped back into the clearing, not disappearing this time, but walking slowly towards them, his masked gaze fixed on the smudged seal drawing on the ground. He stopped just behind Iruka, looking down. Iruka stiffened, his shoulders squaring automatically. What are you doing back here? And don't be rude, he's just starting out, Hound. It takes practice. Practice requires correct guidance, Hound said, his tone neutral but pointed. He knelt down, ignoring Iruka, and picked up the discarded stick Naruto had used. With swift, controlled movements, he drew a perfect flash bomb seal beside Naruto's messy one. The lines were crisp, clean, and flowed with an almost intimidating precision. This is how it's done. Precision is paramount with Fuinjutsu. Chakra control is useless if your foundation is flawed. He stood up, offering the stick back to Naruto. His masked face turned slightly towards Iruka, and though Naruto couldn't see his eyes, he felt the weight of Hound's gaze. Maybe you should let someone with more experience handle this part, Amino. Iruka shot up, standing between Hound and Naruto, his arms crossed defiantly. Excuse me? He's my student. I'm teaching him. You don't just walk up and undermine me like that. I'm not undermining, Hound replied, his voice flat. I'm correcting. There's a difference. And this is a restricted area that I have to keep an eye on, but seeing as you are teaching this kid here, I might as well prevent the kid from blowing off a finger with a poorly drawn seal while I'm at it. He's not going to blow off a finger. Iruka retorted hotly. We're not trying to distract you. How was I supposed to know you were in charge over here? You brought an untrained kid onto a restricted training ground to practice Fuinjutsu, Hound stated, listing it like a series of charges. That sounds a lot like a distraction to me, Amino. It seems like you're not taking this seriously. Again, not that that's new. The last words hung in the air, laced with a familiar, weary disappointment that made Iruka flinch almost imperceptibly. Naruto, caught in the middle, watched the exchange, utterly confused. It wasn't just an argument, it felt like they were speaking in code, bringing up old, unresolved issues. I am taking this seriously, Iruka said, his voice low and sharp, a stark contrast to his earlier defensiveness. But that's besides the point. It's relevant, Hound insisted, though his stance seemed to soften slightly. You get these impulses to help, to teach. It's commendable. He paused, and Naruto thought he heard a hint of something else in his voice, something softer, before it was gone as quickly as it came. But you charge in headfirst without thinking of the outcome. Without considering the consequences of your actions. Like you'd understand, Iruka flared. Someone has to actually teach these kids, really teach them, not just stand back and watch. Not everyone has the luxury of being a prodigy, Hound. Some of us have to work for it, and some of us need someone to believe in them. He gestured emphatically towards Naruto, who blinked, confused by the sudden shift in focus. Hound was silent for a long moment, his masked head tilted as he considered Iruka's words. Then, his gaze shifted back to Naruto, lingering a bit longer than necessary. He has potential, Hound conceded quietly, the admission sounding almost reluctant. But he needs proper form. You're letting him rush. He's eager, Iruka countered. That's a good thing. Eagerness without discipline is just recklessness, Hound stated. He took a step closer, now standing right beside Iruka, their shoulders almost touching. The air between them felt charged, a strange mix of tension and familiarity. I'll stay. I'll supervise. I'll ensure he gets the basics right. You? Stay? Iruka's voice was incredulous. No, absolutely not. He's my student. I found him. I'm teaching him. He was practically vibrating with indignation, puffing up his chest like a protective mother hen. Hey, don't I get a choice in all this? Naruto asked, annoyed, but they both ignored him. It's for the best, Amino, Hound said, his voice dropping slightly, becoming almost persuasive. 2 instructors are better than 1, especially for something as precise as Fuinjutsu. And as the ANBU responsible for this sector, it's my duty to ensure no unauthorized individuals are to go unsupervised. That's ridiculous. You just want to butt in. Iruka accused, throwing his hands up. You always do this. You see me doing something, and you just have to take over, don't you? Just like when, he cut himself off abruptly, biting his lip. Hound didn't react outwardly to the near slip, but the subtle shift in the air around him spoke volumes. The charged tension intensified, becoming heavy with unspoken history. I'm ensuring village safety and proper training standards, Hound said, his voice carefully flat now, masking whatever reaction Iruka had just provoked. It's my duty. I'll observe, and offer corrections where necessary. He looked pointedly at Naruto's drawing again. And necessary corrections are clearly required. Iruka glared at him, his eyes narrowed into furious slits. He opened his mouth, probably to argue more, but Hound simply turned, walking a few paces away to lean against a nearby training post, arms crossed, assuming the posture of someone who wasn't going anywhere. Fine, Iruka grumbled under his breath, turning back to Naruto with a frustrated sigh. Fine, he can supervise. Just ignore him, Menma. He's difficult. He shot another venomous look at Hound's back before forcing a smile for Naruto. Alright, let's try drawing this seal again. Focus on making those lines straight, okay? Naruto nodded slowly, picking up the stick, his mind reeling. He still didn't understand what was going on between Iruka and Hound, but it definitely felt like watching a really weird, tense argument between people who knew each other way too well. How come you and Hound are always together if you don't like each other? Do you guys have some crazy history or something? Naruto asked, drawing the seal again, albeit with shaky lines. Iruka and Hound both tensed simultaneously. We don't have history, Iruka said quickly, face flushing. There is no history, kid, Hound stated flatly from his spot by the post. Naruto deadpanned. Yeah, right, you guys act like you've been arguing for years. What, did you meet in the academy or something? Iruka paled slightly, shooting a glance at Hound, who remained leaning against the post, arms crossed, unreadable behind his mask. No, definitely not the academy, Iruka said quickly, maybe a little too quickly. He rubbed his scar, avoiding Naruto's gaze. We met during the Kyuubi attack, actually. Naruto blinked, stunned. That night? The night Iruka's parents died? The Kyuubi attack? He repeated, the earlier sadness about Iruka's parents mixing with this new information. Iruka nodded, his voice growing softer, now tinged with a different kind of tension. Yeah, it was chaotic. I was just a 12-year-old. My parents, they were trying to get me to safety. And then this ANBU, he was there. He helped me, got me out of a bad spot. He looked towards Hound again, a flicker of something unreadable gratitude? Resentment? In his eyes? Saved my life, actually. Hound didn't move, but Naruto saw his posture stiffen almost imperceptibly. His masked head didn't turn, but it felt like his attention was suddenly razor-sharp on Iruka. "Saved your life?" Naruto asked, looking between Iruka and the silent ANBU. "Then why are you guys always arguing? Shouldn't you be, like, best friends?" Iruka let out a short, humorless laugh. "Best friends? No way. He just happened to be there. It wasn't like some big rescue mission just for me. He was saving other people, too. And ever since then, we've kind of just kept running into each other. Usually, when I'm doing something he thinks is stupid or childish." He shot another glare towards Hound. "He thinks he knows everything just because he's a dumb ANBU. I ensure village safety and proper conduct, Amino. It's not dumb." Hound's voice cut in, flat and steady from his spot by the post. Especially from those who seemed determined to disregard it. "See?" Iruka threw his hands up in exasperation. "Always with the rules. Always telling me I'm not serious enough." He turned back to Naruto, lowering his voice again, standing close to the blonde, probably so Hound couldn't hear what he was going to say. "He saved my life, yeah. I'm grateful for that, but he's still incredibly frustrating." Naruto looked at Hound, then back at Iruka. It was weird. Iruka owed him his life, but it felt like there was a bitter mix of gratitude. And Hound? He just seemed annoyed by Iruka, despite saving him. Naruto couldn't wrap his head around it. People who saved your life were supposed to be heroes you looked up to, like the Yondaime, or like Kakashi. Not someone you constantly bickered with. "So he saved you, but he's still a jerk?" Naruto summarized, trying to make sense of the bizarre dynamic. Iruka sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Pretty much. Look, let's just focus on the seals, okay? The sooner we get this done, the sooner he'll leave us alone." He knelt back down by the smudged drawing, picking up the stick again. "Alright, Menma, let's try again. Remember what Hound said about precision?" He glanced back at the ANBU, a reluctant acknowledgement in his tone. "His drawing was perfect. Try to make yours look like his." He said nothing, but Naruto felt the weight of his silent observation from the edge of the clearing. He picked up his stick, looking at Hound's perfect seal drawing beside his own messy attempt. It felt strange, taking instruction from the guy Iruka clearly couldn't stand, even indirectly. But the drawing was perfect. And Hound had saved Iruka's life, even if they were weird about it now. "Okay," Naruto muttered, focusing on the dirt. He tried to mimic the crisp lines Hound had made, the smooth flow of the stick. It was still hard, still wobbly, but maybe a little better this time. Iruka knelt beside him again, examining the drawing. "See? Much better, Menma. The lines are steadier this time." He gave Naruto an encouraging smile. "Now, try activating this one. Focus on channeling your chakras smoothly." Naruto took a deep breath, placing his palm over the seal. He closed his eyes, concentrating. He felt the familiar warmth, stronger this time, a steadier thrumming beneath his hand. He pushed more chakra into it, holding his breath. A small puff of gray smoke appeared, slightly bigger than his last attempt, accompanied by a faint pop. It wasn't the impressive flash bomb Iruka had demonstrated, but it was definitely more than a fizz and a wisp. "Awesome." Naruto grinned, opening his eyes. "It worked a little better. That's progress," Iruka said, beaming. "See? Just keep practicing, and you'll get it. Accuracy and control will come." As Naruto started to draw a third seal, a sudden, almost imperceptible shift pulled his attention. Hound, who had been leaning casually against the training post, was no longer relaxed. His body was rigid, his masked head slowly sweeping across the tree line, his stance changing from casual observer to coiled spring in an instant. He said nothing, but the sudden, intense focus radiating from him was palpable. Iruka followed Naruto's gaze, his own expression shifting from cheerful encouragement to wary alertness. He quietly rose to his feet, his hand instinctively going to the kunai pouch on his leg. The air in the training ground, moments ago filled with the easy sound of instruction and the scratch of a stick on dirt, grew heavy, charged with unspoken tension. Hound wasn't just observing anymore, he was scenting danger. Then, three figures burst from the trees at the edge of the clearing, landing lightly on the grass a short distance away. They wore tattered headbands with the village symbols scratched out, missing nins. Their faces were hard, eyes narrowed, and their chakra signatures felt immediately hostile. One held a large, jagged sword, another had hands crackling with lightning, and the third held a handful of explosive tags. Well, the one with the sword sneered, his gaze flicking over Iruka and Hound. Looks like we stumbled onto some leaf shinobi. His eyes lingered on Hound's ANBU mask. And an ANBU, no less. This just got interesting. Stay behind me, Menma. Iruka's voice was sharp, instantly shifting from mentor to protector. He shoved Naruto gently but firmly back, placing himself squarely between the blonde and the missing nins. His hand gripped a kunai tightly. At the same time, without a word, Hound moved with blinding speed, positioning himself on Naruto's other side. It was a fluid, automatic movement, the two of them forming an immediate, non-verbal shield around the boy. Hound's hand rested on the hilt of a short sword concealed at his back, his masked gaze locked onto the missing nins, radiating a silent, deadly warning. Looks like they're protecting the kid, the missing nin with the lightning hands chuckled, a cruel sound. Maybe he's important? Who cares, the third missing nin said, tossing an explosive tag into the air. They're in the way, let's get them out of it. The tag flew towards them, a small, deadly projectile. Iruka reacted instantly, grabbing Naruto's arm and yanking him hard to the side as Hound simultaneously lunged forward. Kunai flashing, intercepting the tag midair with a precise strike that deflected it harmlessly to the side, where it exploded in a burst of smoke and dirt away from them. Get back. Hound's voice was a low growl, directed as much at Naruto as the attackers. He didn't look at Naruto, his focus entirely on the missing nins, but his stance was defensive, clearly prioritizing the boy's safety. Iruka, still holding onto Naruto, pulled him further back, away from the immediate line of fire. Stay down, Menma. Don't move, he ordered, his eyes darting between the attackers and Hound, a flicker of desperate coordination passing between them. Naruto stumbled back, yelping as he was yanked first by Iruka and then implicitly shielded by Hound's protective positioning. He landed on the grass, watching the scene unfold. Iruka and Hound, who minutes ago were bickering like cats and dogs, were now a seamless, protective unit, their movements sharp and synchronized, entirely focused on keeping him safe. And Naruto felt a surge of hot, familiar frustration. He wasn't some defenseless kid, or a civilian who needed to be shielded. He was a ninja, a leaf shinobi. He knew how to fight. He could fight. He needed to prove he wasn't weak, not to them, not to himself. Hey, I can handle myself, Naruto yelled, trying to scramble back to his feet, to push past their protective barrier. He glared, not just at the approaching missing nins, but at Iruka and Hound. Stop treating me like a baby. I can fight. Iruka didn't even look at him, his eyes fixed on the missing nins. Stay put, Menma. These guys are dangerous. This isn't your fight, kid. Hound's voice was sharp, dismissive, just like it had been earlier. He parried a sword strike from the first missing nin, the clang of metal echoing through the clearing. Naruto clenched his fists, digging his heels into the dirt. They were ignoring him, shoving him aside, treating him as if he would just cause them to be at a disadvantage. All he wanted was a chance to prove himself, and they were shutting him down, just like everyone always did. He wasn't weak. He isn't helpless. He's beaten crazier ninjas than these ones. He was more than capable of winning this fight. He glared at the missing nins, then back at the backs of Iruka and Hound, who were moving with practiced ease, defending against the attack while always keeping him behind them. The annoyance, the frustration, the burning need to show them he wasn't just a kid to be protected, boiled inside him. Like he'd just stand here. He wouldn't let them treat him like he was useless. With a surge of desperate energy, Naruto pushed himself up, scrambling back to his feet. He dug into his pocket, his fingers fumbling for the familiar weight of a kunai. He could throw it, he could distract them, he could, but before he could even fully straighten up, before he could aim or throw, the missing nins suddenly faltered. The one with the sword stumbled back as Hound landed a sharp kick to his chest. The one with lightning hands yelped as Iruka, surprisingly agile, dodged a strike and landed a solid punch to his jaw. The third, momentarily distracted, failed to notice Hound's swift movement. They're stronger than they look, the swordsman grunted, clutching his chest. This isn't worth it, the lightning user snarled, shaking his head to clear it. Let's go, the one with the tags yelled, already turning tail. In a flash, as quickly as they had appeared, the three missing nins turned and bolted back into the dense trees, disappearing into the shadows. Naruto froze, kunai half-drawn, his mouth open in protest. Was it over? Just like that? He hadn't even gotten a chance. He hadn't done anything. Iruka and Hound immediately dropped their defensive stances, their bodies still coiled with leftover tension. Hound lowered his short sword, his masked head sweeping the tree line for any sign of pursuit. Iruka turned back to Naruto, his expression shifting from fierce protection back to concern. "Are you okay, Menma?" Iruka asked, hurrying over to him, his eyes scanning him for injuries. Naruto just stared, the kunai still clutched uselessly in his hand. He felt a rush of anticlimax, a wave of frustration so potent it almost made him want to scream. I could have helped. He finally choked out, his voice tight with indignation. Why did they just leave? I was gonna. Menma, they were dangerous. Iruka interrupted gently, taking the kunai from Naruto's unresisting fingers. You shouldn't have tried to jump in. Hound and I had it handled. Had it handled? Naruto exploded, throwing his hands up. I didn't even get to do anything. You guys just fought them for 2 seconds, and they ran away. I'm not some infant. I can fight. Hound walked over, his movements slow and deliberate now that the immediate threat was gone. He stopped beside Iruka, his masked gaze seeming to bore into Naruto. You were ordered to stay down, kid. Following orders is part of being a shinobi. Rushing into a fight unprepared is foolish. I wasn't unprepared, Naruto yelled, glaring at the dog mask. I had my kunai. I could have helped. Helping requires skill and timing, kid, Hound stated flatly. Not just enthusiasm. You would have been a liability. A liability? Naruto's jaw dropped. That stung. That really stung. You think I can't handle myself? I think you're untrained for that level of threat, Hound corrected, his voice unwavering. Amino and I are more experienced. You aren't. Your eagerness is commendable, but it needs discipline. Iruka stepped between them slightly, trying to diffuse the tension. Okay, everyone calm down. Menma is right. Those were dangerous missing nins. It's better that you stayed back. But I could have helped you. Naruto protested, turning his glare on Iruka. I know how to fight. And I don't need to be protected. I could have shown you if you'd just given me the chance. Iruka sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know you want to be strong, Menma. And you are. But rushing into a fight like that isn't smart. It's reckless. A good ninja knows when to fight and when to stay back. Naruto let out a raw growl of pure frustration, hands clenching into fists, gripping his own messy hair. Don't act like you know anything about me. You don't get it at all. He practically screamed, whirling away from their concerned, uncomprehending faces. Frustration burned like wildfire in his chest, hot and suffocating. They couldn't understand. This wasn't just about his own strength, his own selfish desire to be powerful. It was about them. It was about proving, finally, irrevocably, that he could protect them. That he wasn't the dead weight, the weak link, the one who always needed someone else to step in front of him. His mind, against his will, dragged him back to the bitter memory of his first days at the academy, long before Iruka. Back then, it felt like everyone else was miles ahead, born with an innate understanding he could only dream of. They grasped jutsu effortlessly, their movements fluid and sure, while he tripped and stumbled, scrambling just to keep up. He remembered the gnawing emptiness of relying on others for help that never came, the cold sting of being ignored, of having to teach himself everything through sheer, desperate trial and error because no one else cared enough to show him. But that was the past. A fierce, new resolve surged through him now, a burning certainty that something fundamental had shifted. He was moving forward, faster than ever before, finally becoming the person he was meant to be. Stronger, capable, worthy. He kicked viciously at the dirt, sending a thick, angry cloud of dust swirling into the air. The oppressive quiet of the training ground, usually a place of bustling activity, felt suffocatingly heavy now, broken only by the faint, mocking chirping of unseen birds. All of it pressed down on him, amplifying the raw disappointment and fury churning in his gut. He had been ready. More than ready, he had needed this chance, needed to show them just how far he'd come. And it had been ripped away before he could even take a single step. Menma, look, Iruka said, his voice strained with a weary mix of frustration and concern as he stepped closer. I know you're upset, but honestly, it's okay. You're safe, and right now, that's the absolute priority. Upset? Naruto spat the word like poison, still refusing to meet his gaze. His voice was tight with biting contempt. Honestly, you're both so dense. I don't want to just be safe. That's not enough. I want to be strong. I need to fight. Hound let out a low, gravelly sound that was distinctly unimpressed. It was less a word, more a rumble of pure dismissal. Wanting and being capable are two entirely different things, kid. Focus on learning the absolute basics first. Then you can even think about fighting. His tone was flat, cutting, and utterly devoid of sympathy. You don't even know what I'm capable of. Naruto yelled, finally spinning around to face them, his face a mask of frustration that had boiled over into pure, unadulterated rage. You don't even know why I'm here. So stop acting like Menma. A sudden, sharp shortcut through the tense air, urgent and laced with alarm, making all three of them jump. Naruto, Iruka, and Hound snapped their heads towards the edge of the clearing in perfect unison. Bursting from the dense trees, looking unusually serious and focused, was Kakashi in his Sukeya disguise. What is it, Sukeya-sensei? What's wrong? Naruto demanded, the sheer urgency in Kakashi's voice instantly startling him out of his furious headspace. He had never heard the usually laid-back sensei sound quite like that before. Kakashi stopped a few feet away, his gaze fixing instantly and intensely on Naruto, then flickering quickly to Iruka and Hound standing rigidly beside him. Seeing them, a subtle flicker of caution crossed Kakashi's face, his expression tightening almost imperceptibly. Menma, Kakashi said again, his voice lower now, but still taut with that same urgent tension. He glanced pointedly at Iruka and Hound, a clear, silent message passing between them before his gaze snapped back to Naruto. I need to talk to you. Now. Iruka's expression, which had been etched with concern and annoyance over Naruto's outburst just moments before, instantly hardened into a mask of deep wariness as he stared at the serious teacher. He subtly shifted his weight, moving a fraction of an inch closer to Naruto, a silent protective gesture. Hound remained utterly silent, his masked head tilted just so, his observation of the newcomer intensely, almost aggressively, scrutinizing. Now? Naruto repeated, looking back and forth between the intense Sukeya and the suddenly tense figures of Iruka and Hound. Kakashi's sudden, urgent arrival had completely shattered the previous mood, replacing the lingering anger with a cold, sharp knot of concern in his stomach. Okay, what's so wrong? Away from here, Kakashi insisted, gesturing back towards the trees with a sharp, impatient jerk of his head. Just for a moment. It's about our travels. Quickly. Naruto's eyes widened, the clear demand in Kakashi's voice overriding his own lingering anger and confusion. He glanced at Iruka, whose face was a mask of deep uneasiness. I'll be right back, he promised, though the words felt weak. Iruka looked profoundly uncertain, his gaze flicking nervously from Kakashi back to Naruto, then to Hound, who offered no visible indication of his thoughts beneath the mask. Are you sure, Menma? Sukeya-san seems very agitated. Are you guys okay? This is none of your business, Naruto scoffed, the words sharper than he intended, even as his gut twisted with concern. He pushed past Iruka's hesitant form and started walking towards Kakashi, who immediately turned and began heading back into the dense trees. He had just emerged from, moving with a speed that suggested a strong need for privacy and haste. Naruto followed, leaving a clearly worried Iruka and a predatorily still Hound behind in the sun-dappled clearing. They walked only a short distance into the shadows of the woods before Kakashi stopped abruptly, turning back to face Naruto. The urgent look in his eyes hadn't entirely faded, replaced now by a cold, tense seriousness that made Naruto's skin prickle. Naruto, Kakashi said, his voice barely a whisper now, low and steady, his gaze piercing, as if afraid the very trees might be listening to their conversation. He leaned in slightly, dropping his voice even further, forcing Naruto to lean closer to hear. I found him. Naruto blinked, confused for a split second, the cold knot of concern tightening painfully in his stomach. Found who? The enemy Nin, the one with the fishing rod. He paused for a heavy beat, letting the words hang in the air between them, thick with unspoken meaning. I found where he's hiding. Naruto's breath hitched painfully in his throat. You found him? So he's actually here? His eyes widened, blown wide with shock. He stumbled back a half step, his voice barely a disbelieving whisper. Well, where is he? Kakashi's eyes narrowed, scanning the dense woods around them before leaning in even closer. He's not far. I followed his trail back to a hidden cave just on the other side of the village, in the woods near the river. Naruto's mind raced, picturing the location. The river, that was where they'd run into Iruka and Hound just yesterday. The same area where Kakashi had said he'd look for signs of the enemy nin. The river? Naruto repeated, the cold knot in his stomach tightening. But, that's where Iruka-sensei and Hound were. Kakashi nodded his head slowly, his expression grim. I noticed that the enemy nin is much more careful than I originally thought. His chakra signature is unique. Unlike anything I've sensed before. He paused, his gaze distant for a second, lost in thought. He's deliberately masking his presence, keeping a low profile. So he's just waiting? Naruto asked, his earlier anger about the fight forgotten, replaced by a chilling sense of unease. The fishing rod guy wasn't just a random weirdo, he was a hidden threat, lurking nearby. Waiting, planning, I don't know, Kakashi confirmed, bringing his focus back to Naruto. But I know where he is. And I need to deal with him. Now. Okay, let's go, Naruto said immediately, taking a step forward, ready to follow. Kakashi stopped him with a raised hand, his expression turning serious. No, Naruto. I need to deal with him. Alone. Naruto froze, his initial eagerness replaced by disbelief. Alone? What? No way, Kakashi-sensei. You can't go by yourself. What if he's super strong? What if it's another trap? That's why I need to go alone, Naruto, Kakashi said, his voice firm and unwavering. You heard what I said before. You draw too much attention right now. Remember, he was specifically targeting you, and if this is connected to time travel, your presence could complicate things in ways we don't fully understand. But I can help. Naruto protested, the familiar frustration bubbling up again, though it was tinged with genuine worry for his sensei. You saw me. I can fight. I'm strong enough. I know you're strong, Naruto, Kakashi repeated, his voice softer now, but still resolute. But this isn't about strength. It's about strategy and minimizing risk. My mission is to find out what he's doing here and stop him, without altering this timeline any more than necessary. That means moving undetected. And you? He gestured vaguely at Naruto, a hint of his usual teasing returning for just a second before fading. You aren't exactly built for subtlety, are you? Naruto scowled, crossing his arms. Hey, I can be subtle. Perhaps you have your moments, Kakashi conceded dryly. But right now, the risk of you being recognized or drawing attention is too high. I need to go in, assess the situation, and act quickly. Having you with me, it would be a distraction I can't afford. A distraction. The word hit Naruto like a physical blow, echoing Hound's earlier cutting remark. A liability. Was that all he was? Someone who just got in the way. So I'm just supposed to, what? Stay here? Wait? Naruto's voice was tight with frustration and disappointment. He had just been told he needed to stay safe, stay put, and now that the real threat was found, he was still being ordered to the sidelines? Yes, Naruto. That's exactly what you're supposed to do, Kakashi said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He stepped closer, placing his hands firmly on Naruto's shoulders, his gaze intense. You need to go back to the village. Stay there. Stay with Iruka, like I said. Or someone else reliable. Do not leave the village gates. Do you understand? Naruto stared up at him, his jaw clenched. He understood the words, but he didn't want to. He wanted to be involved. He wanted to help. He wanted to prove he wasn't a burden, especially not now, when a real danger was lurking. The unfairness of it all, of being told he was strong but then immediately being sidelined, of being told to stay safe while Kakashi went into danger alone, boiled over. Why won't you ever let me help? Naruto burst out, shoving Kakashi's hands off his shoulders, his voice cracking with raw emotion. You always do this. You always push me away. You and Iruka-sensei always push me to the side. You rushed in to save me from that fishing rod guy even though I could have handled it. And now you find the enemy and you just say, stay put, Naruto. His fists clenched at his sides, trembling. I'm not a liability. I'm not a kid, you need to hide away. I can fight. I'm training to become a future Hokage. How am I supposed to do that if you never let me do anything? Kakashi's eyes widened slightly at the intensity of the outburst, his expression shifting from firm resolve to something akin to surprise, then concern. Naruto, that's not what I'm saying. This is different. This isn't about your strength. Yes, it is. Naruto yelled, the frustration and anger he'd been bottling up all day exploding. It's always about whether you guys think I'm good enough. You think I'm just some loudmouth kid who gets in the way. Like Hound. He said I was a liability too. Is that what you think? You think I'm just getting in the way? He took a shaky step back, glaring at Kakashi through eyes that were starting to sting. I risked getting a shuriken in the back because I wanted to help protect Iruka-sensei. Just like he's done for me. And I want to help you. Why can't you see that? Why won't you let me? Naruto, listen to me, Kakashi said, trying to step closer, his voice softer now, laced with urgency. This isn't a simple fight. We don't know what this enemy nin is capable of, or how his jutsu works, or what his connection to this time travel is. Going in alone is the safest strategy right now. For both of us. Safest strategy? Naruto scoffed, the sound bitter. You're going in alone. That's not safe. What if he's too strong? What if he traps you? What if something happens to you? The fear of Kakashi warring with his own sense of uselessness was tearing him apart. I'm a Junin and your sensei, Naruto. This is my job, Kakashi repeated, his tone firming up again, though the concern was still visible in his eyes. And your job, right now, is to stay safe. To not add another complication to this mess. Pretend this is an S-rank mission, Naruto. And your part in it is to stay put. Can you do that for me? No. Naruto screamed, the word torn from his throat. He couldn't. He wouldn't just stand by. Not again. Not when someone he cared about was walking into danger. Kakashi would never listen to him, that much was painfully clear. It felt like he was yelling into thin air, with his cries just disappearing because no one seemed to care. After all the disappointments, he had hoped Kakashi could be different. But instead, Kakashi's stiff attitude just confirmed Naruto's worst fears. Iruka and Hound weren't any better, they saw him as just a pain in the neck, a hassle to deal with instead of someone to connect with. It was a never-ending cycle of feeling alone, making him face the harsh truth that everyone around him saw him as just a problem that no one cared to sort out. He spun around, turning his back on Kakashi, his chest heaving with furious, painful breaths. He didn't care about strategy or complications or S-rank missions. He just knew he couldn't stay here, waiting, being useless. Naruto, where are you going? Kakashi's voice called out, sharp with alarm. Naruto refused to listen, too fueled by a blinding mix of anger, frustration, and desperate need to care about what Kakashi was going to say. He took off running, plunging deeper into the woods, away from Kakashi, away from the arguments, away from the feeling of being sidelined and useless. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to move, had to do something, anything, other than just stand there and wait. Naruto, get back here. Kakashi's voice echoed behind him, urgent and fading as Naruto pushed through the trees, his heart pounding a furious rhythm against his ribs, the sound drowning out everything else. Naruto didn't know how long he had been running for. The forest had swallowed the last rays of daylight hours ago, leaving him alone in a world of shadows and rustling leaves. His lungs burned, his legs ached, and the frantic energy that had propelled him forward had finally sputtered out, leaving him stranded in a patch of unfamiliar, dense woods. He stumbled, catching himself on a rough tree trunk, his breath coming in ragged gasps. It was late. He didn't know where he was anymore. The darkness pressed in on all sides, thick and suffocating. The familiar chirping of crickets felt distant, swallowed by the vast, indifferent quiet of the night forest. He sank to the ground, leaning his back against the cool, rough bark, pulling his knees up to his chest. The anger that had fueled his flight was starting to drain away, leaving behind a hollow, aching emptiness. He was lost. Physically, yes, but the feeling went deeper. Lost in this strange past, lost in the confusion of everything that had happened, and most of all, lost within himself. Why wouldn't they just let him help? Why did they always treat him like he was just a kid, someone who needed to be shielded and protected? Iruka, Hound, Kakashi, they all did it. They saw the loudmouth, the prankster, the kid who needed saving. They didn't see the ninja he was trying so desperately to become. They didn't see how hard he had fought, how much he had endured, just to stand where he was. Liability. Hound's flat, cutting voice echoed in his mind. Untrained for that level of threat. A distraction. Kakashi's softer, but equally dismissive, words followed. "You aren't exactly built for subtlety." The words ringed in his head, making his gut twist, bitter and sharply. It wasn't just about this mission, was it? It was the same old story. He was too loud, too eager, too much. He got in the way. He was a burden. The memories of the villagers' glares, of being kicked out, of being alone in his empty apartment, came flooding back with brutal clarity. Monster, unsafe, a liability. They were all saying the same thing, just in different ways. Even the people who were supposed to care about him, the people he cared about, seemed to think he was better off on the sidelines. He thought of Iruka talking about his parents, about his mother shielding him, about a parent's job being to protect their child. A parent's job. He didn't have parents. He was the one who had to protect himself. He was the one who had to fight to be seen, to be accepted, to prove he wasn't just the container for a monster. And when he finally found people he wanted to protect, people he wanted to stand beside, they just pushed him back. First, it was Sasuke. Then, Iruka. Now, Kakashi. Even teenage Iruka and Hound didn't seem to think he was capable enough. He curled tighter into himself, the cold seeping into his bones, mirroring the chill settling in his heart. The darkness of the woods felt suffocating, heavy, like the weight of all the expectations, all the disappointments, all the loneliness he carried. He had run, but there was no escaping it. No escaping the feeling that, no matter how strong he got, he would always be the kid who needed saving, the one who just got in the way. Everyone he cared about hated him. Tears, hot and unwelcome, pricked at his eyes. He scrubbed at them angrily with the back of his hand. He shouldn't be crying. He was a ninja. He was going to be Hokage. Hokage didn't cry because people thought they were useless. He hated himself for wanting to be noticed. The tears kept coming, silent and relentless, tracing warm paths down his cold cheeks. He was lost, alone, and the weight of feeling unwanted, unneeded, was heavier than any training weight. He had wanted to help. He had wanted to prove himself. He had wanted to be strong enough to protect them, the way they had protected him. But they didn't believe him. And in the suffocating silence of the dark forest, surrounded by nothing but shadows and the echoes of their dismissive words, he was starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they were right. No. The thought slammed into him, sharp and sudden, cutting through the fog of despair. No, they weren't right. Hound wasn't right. Kakashi wasn't right. He wasn't a liability. He wasn't useless. He was Naruto Uzumaki. And he didn't just want to be strong, he was strong. He had faced worse than a few mean words and being pushed aside. He had faced the Kyuubi's power, faced Zabuza, faced Gaara, faced Sasuke. He had fought tooth and nail for everything he had. And he wouldn't stop fighting now. They thought he couldn't handle it? Fine, let them think that. Let them underestimate him. It wasn't the first time. But he wasn't going to sit here in the dark, feeling sorry for himself, while Kakashi went into danger alone. Kakashi, who had just shown him a glimpse of something real, something vulnerable back at the house. Kakashi, who was walking into a fight with an enemy they knew nothing about. He wouldn't be a liability. He wouldn't be a distraction. He would be a help. He would do it himself. Alone. Because clearly, that was the only way anyone would ever let him do anything important. Pushing himself up from the cold ground, Naruto stumbled slightly, his legs stiff and aching. The anger hadn't entirely vanished, but it had sharpened into a hard, cold resolve. He didn't know exactly where the cave was, only that Kakashi said it was near the river, on the other side of the village. That was enough. He could find the river. He could follow it. He could find the cave. He didn't have a plan. He didn't know what he would do when he found the enemy Nen. But he knew one thing for certain, he wasn't going to wait. Not anymore. He wasn't going to be the kid who stayed put while others fought his battles. He was going to prove them wrong. He was going to show them he wasn't useless. He was going to find that enemy Nen, and he was going to deal with him. And he was going to do it all by himself. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Naruto turned his face towards where he thought the river might be, guided only by a vague sense of direction and sheer, desperate determination. The forest was a maze of shadows, the darkness absolute, but he started walking, pushing through the underbrush, stumbling over roots, ignoring the scratches and the cold. Every painful step was a defiance. Every rustle of leaves was a challenge. He was going to find that cave. He was going to find that enemy. He was going to do what they wouldn't let him do. He was going to protect them. He was going to show them all. He pushed deeper into the woods, the darkness clinging to him like a second skin. The trees twisted into monstrous shapes in the faint moonlight that filtered through the canopy. He wasn't sure if he was heading in the right direction, but he kept going, stumbling over roots and crashing through bushes, making enough noise to scare off any small animals. He knew he wasn't being quiet, but he didn't care. He just needed to find the river. His exhaustion was catching up to him. His steps grew heavier, his vision swam with weariness. He stopped for a moment, leaning against a tree, rubbing his aching legs. Maybe he should just wait until the morning? No, he couldn't. Kakashi was out there, maybe walking into a trap right now. He had to do something. Oof, he groaned, pushing himself up onto his hands and knees, shaking his head to clear it. He looked around, trying to see what he'd tripped on. A low chuckle echoed from the shadows nearby. Naruto froze, his heart leaping into his throat. He wasn't alone. He scrambled back, his eyes wide as he scanned the darkness. The chuckle came again, closer this time, dripping with a chilling amusement. Well, a voice drawled, stepping out from behind a thick tree trunk. The moonlight caught the pale, papery skin and the bluish-silver hair tied back in a messy ponytail. In his hand, he held the long, glowing red fishing rod. The enemy Nin. A cold dread washed over Naruto, instantly replacing his exhaustion and frustration. He scrambled back further, his mind racing. He hadn't found the cave. The enemy had found him. Lost, little brat? The man sneered, his eyes glinting in the dim light. He twirled the fishing rod, the red tip glowing ominously. Seems your friends weren't very good at keeping you contained, were they? Naruto pushed himself fully onto his feet, his body trembling, not just from fear, but from exhaustion and the sudden shock. Why you're that guy. The one who wants you, the enemy Nin confirmed, his grin widening. He took a slow, deliberate step closer. And it seems you've made this quite easy for me. Running right into my path. Alone. Stay away from me. Naruto yelled, fumbling in his jacket pocket for a kunai, just like he had earlier at the training ground. His fingers closed around the cold metal, but his hand was shaking. A kunai? The enemy Nin scoffed, a wave of condescending amusement rolling off him. Do you really think that will stop me, little fox demon? He didn't give Naruto a chance to respond. With a flick of his wrist, the glowing red rod shot out, moving with impossible speed and accuracy. Too slow. Naruto's body felt heavy, sluggish from his frantic running and emotional drain. He tried to dodge, but it was useless. The red tendrils of the rod wrapped around him, just like before, snagging his arms and legs, lifting him off the ground with a painful jolt. Hey, let me go. Naruto thrashed against the binding, but the more he struggled, the tighter the red energy coiled around him, squeezing the air from his lungs. The enemy Nin reeled him in, pulling him closer. He reached out a hand, his long, pale fingers brushing against Naruto's cheek as he rolled off his mask, a gesture that sent a tremble of loathing down Naruto's spine. Finally, the man murmured, examining Naruto with a strange, calculating gaze. The vessel is secured. Vessel? Naruto gasped, struggling for air. What are you talking about? What do you want from me? The enemy Nin didn't answer directly. He just tightened his grip on the rod, pulling Naruto closer still, until they were almost face to face. Your chakra is interesting, the man said, his voice low and curious. Much more potent than I expected from this era. The turtle was right. He began to drag Naruto away, back into the deeper shadows of the woods, away from the direction Naruto had been trying to go. Naruto kicked and screamed, but it was all useless. The enemy Nin was too strong, his grip too firm. Let me go. Kakashi-sensei. Iruka-sensei. Naruto cried out, his voice desperate, fading into the rustling leaves and the indifferent silence of the night forest. He was alone, and he had been found. The darkness swallowed them whole. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.